Howdy, y'all. Welcome back to the Lone Star Podcast. Really excited to be here today. I got a real treat for everybody. This is Dr Pustilnik. He is master of many arts, so come to find out. So I originally found out about you through a friend of mine, Andy Vincent, who came on the podcast, and I was telling him about folks that I wanted to have on, and I was looking for a knife maker and this and that, and he said that you need to get a hold of this guy from Houston Edgeworks. He said, man, this guy's doing really cool stuff. He's got a lot of top chefs using his stuff. He's really awesome. And he showed me your page on Instagram. Mm-hmm. So that's how I contacted you and got a hold. But then once I started doing a little bit of research, I found out you're a forensic pathologist.
Correct.
And you're going to have to tell me again the word that you use for your penmanship.
For my penmanship?
Yeah. So you're pen making. You're the one of those.
I'm the pen doctor.
Pen doctor. Okay. Go ahead and pull a little bit closer. There you go. But what did you call it? It's something with a D, right? You're
a nibmeister.
Nibmeister.
Right. There's very few of us in the country, and I've been doing this since probably 2002 or so, modifying nibs and handwriting and stuff like that for people who are left-handed. They're oblique writers. They turn their fountain pens. There's always been an interest in fountain pens, and now there's an actual resurgence of it. And I've been doing this up at Dromgool's in Rice Village pretty regularly, and people go there. And people tell me they see me online. It's like, where online? He said, well, we read about you on these blogs. It's like, what blogs?
You didn't section those blogs.
I don't. It's like I don't do it. Okay, so people come and they want a special nib for their fountain pen. They want a oblique or an oblique italic, or they want an italic. Some people are overwriters. Some people are underwriters. They're left-handed. They run their fingers through the ink as they write. They run their.
So how do you fix that? Because I myself am left-handed, and of course, being a left-handed person, pencil, pen, whatever it is, when you get done writing, your left hand is covered.
Well, for fountain pens are two tines that come together at the very tip.
Okay.
That fountain pens are. This is how I explain it. Fountain pens are a controlled leakage instrument, meaning the tines come together at the very tip, only very lightly, and the meniscus of ink that comes down between them basically stops there. But it's right at the very tip of the nib, so that when you touch it to the paper, the fibers of the paper draw the ink down onto it by capillary action. Okay, so you can imagine there's a nib that has a tine that has a certain width on the left side and a tine that has a certain width on the right side, and those. If you want to have a wider pen, you have a wider line, you have a wider tines. If you have a narrow line, you have narrower tines. However, some people turn them left or right. They rotate them. Okay. So if you turn a tine left, you rotate up on the outside corner of it, and guess what? The meniscus of ink doesn't hit the paper correctly, and you get skipping, you get railroad tracking, you don't get good writing. So those are people who are oblique writers. The issue, I won't say the problem, but the issue with left-handed writers is left-handed writers have three main ways that they write with. They either write across or turn the paper down toward them, mm-hmm. and their hand runs underneath the line that they're mm-hmm. writing. Those are what we call underwriters. Okay, there's some people, the left-handed writers, that turn the paper away and write from their belly outward, mm-hmm. and those people, their hand runs above the line that they're writing, and those are people we call overwriters. And then there are those who basically, with the paper turned perpendicular to their line of sight, they write straight across their visual field, and they run their fourth and fifth fingers through the line of ink or pencil or whatever across what they're just writing, and they're called pushers. Whereas right-handed people that do the same thing, that write with their hand mm-hmm. in line with their writing, they're pulling. Mm-hmm. That's 85+% of the world writes that way, or underwriters of right-handed people. So for people like that, for overwriters and underwriters, they can actually turn the pen. So I have to do an oblique where I shorten one of the tines so that when they rotate the pen, the two tines hit perfectly the paper because they've rotated it, and that the meniscus of ink in the slit comes right down onto the paper and gets drawn into the fibers of the paper perfectly for them. Overwriters, I have to turn it away. They had to turn it away from themselves. But pushers, you can't really do anything about it. You just have to. My mother was left-handed, but she has the absolute most beautiful, stunning right-handed writing because when she was in school in the Bronx in the 1930s, when corporal punishment was allowed, they tied her hand behind her back during school because left-handed was evil.
Yes.
Okay. Anything left, dextro is levo is dextro is dextro is Greek. The Latin word for left-handed is sine. Okay, and that's where the word sinister comes from. So anything left-handed at the time was thought to be evil. Mm-hmm. So the teachers literally tied her hand and forced her to write only right-handed. So her handwriting is just as you saw in those handwriting textbook, handwriting practice books that perfectly curved and stuff like that we used to practice with when we were in second, third, and fourth grades. Anyway, for people like you, who is a pusher, you have to use what we call a FastDry Ink.
Okay.
And that's an ink. So if you look at your hand, there's about an inch and a half between the tip of the pen and your fourth finger as you write and push through it. So we have special inks that will dry in that inch and a half distance, so that by the time your finger comes across the letter that you just wrote, it's actually dry on the paper. Wow. We call it left-hander's ink. So you can actually write with a fountain pen that will not smudge your fourth and fifth fingers. Paste ink, which is what's in ballpoints, that takes more time to dry. So that's when you get the crap going across your fourth fingers, fourth and fifth fingers, and the hypothenar eminence of your hand. The thenar eminence is your base, your thumb. Anyway, so we can help you mitigate some of those problems. But the thing is, you have to write with a fountain pen.
Yes, and my handwriting is not nearly pretty enough to warrant a fountain pen.
Well, mine's horrible. I mean, but I write all day long, taking my notes, doing work in the morning, stuff like that, and I use my fountain pens for that. I mean, I probably have 700 plus fountain pens.
So that's 2002. You started working at the Spot in Rice Village, correct?
Correct. I was there. I had just passed my forensic boards.
Okay.
And I wanted to treat myself to a pen.
Okay.
I had been collecting for years before that, but I wanted a new pen. So I said, "Oh, there's a fountain pen store here." So I went to Drungles in the village, and I got my first, fountain pen, and I got more. Not my first fountain pen. I got a fountain pen to celebrate with and to treat myself because I passed my boards. Then I started going back every once in a while and buying a pen and stuff like that. No problem, every once in a while. And I was writing with them. Occasionally, I was using a lot of ballpoints at that time. And then there was this older gentleman from Beaumont area came over, and I think he was a retired physician or engineer. I think he was a physician. He came over. He must have been in his 70s, and he found his Parker 51 fountain pen that he had when he was in college, and it wasn't working. It wasn't. I don't remember if the tines were bent or whatever, but he wanted it serviced. And the owner of the store only sold new stuff and didn't know anything about vintage. We had here for years what was called Fountain Pen Hospital up in Humble, and they went defunct. They became Pen World Magazine, but he stopped doing repairs and stuff like that. So I'm standing there at the counter, and this older gentleman is talking to Larry Dromgoole, the owner of the store, and says, "How can I get this repaired?" And Larry is just saying, I don't know. So Larry kind of knew me because I had been in there several times, so he gets to know his customers if they come back and stuff like that. And I turned to him and said, I could probably fix that because I've only fixed like 25 of my own. I'll get it working again. So he gave it to me. He said, "Come back in 2 weeks." So I came back in 2 weeks, and I had fixed his pen, and he liked it. So Larry and I started talking, and then I would start amassing all my traveling kit to do fountain pen repairs. And I started doing the fountain pen repairs, vintage and new. And then I started up there at Dromgole's. And then I started, my handwriting sucks. I want to make it look a little bit nicer. How can I do that? But I still have to be able to use it. I'm not going to be doing greeting cards or anything like that. I want to make my daily handwritten notes look different, look better. Maybe look less crappy, less doctor-ish. So I got a what do you call it? An italic nib from a nibmeister out in California for a Pelican pen. One of my favorite pens was a Pelican's, and they just screw in the nibs, screw in and out. And I got it from him. I think I paid $175 for it. He sent it to me. Scratchy as all get out. Perfect flow. Beautiful line. It's scratchy as all get out. So I was like, what's wrong with this stupid thing? So I look at it and I couldn't really see. So then I put it under my microscope at 125x power, and I got an incident light to come in from the top because transmission scopes, the light sources below it that go through the glass slides that you look at. So I got an incident light source to like glance off of it. And I'm looking at it under 125x power, and I'm seeing that there's these grind lines going from the back of the nib all the way out to the tip of the nib, and it looks like a serrated edge. Oh, that's what I'm feeling when I'm writing. That's why it's so scratchy. So I called the nibmeister up. Absolutely sweet guy. And I talked to his wife, and she said, oh, that's probably one of the raw nibs. We sent you a raw nib by mistake. What's a raw nib? Well, at that point, he had an assistant called Greg Minushkin, who was apparently, they do raw grinds, and then when someone called in and ordered it, then the nibmeister, which was John Monteshaw, would finish it off.
Polish it up.
He would polish it up, smooth it up, do all that sort of stuff to it. And she said, we probably just pulled it out of the raw nib thing for you. You want to send it back? He said, no, I don't think, I think I can try it myself. He said, okay, no problem. I told him who I was and what I did. So he obviously figured out that he learned quickly that I wasn't some ultra noob at doing this. Sweet guy. He sent me a polishing cloth, a 12,000 grit polishing cloth. He said, here, this will help. So I started polishing. It was just polishing the ridges of the grinds. Wasn't helping. So I said, well, okay, well, how can I do this? How can I do this? What can I do? Oh, when I do my knives, I use waterstones of different grits. So I sat there and I sort of started rubbing it on the sides of my waterstones to get the right angles and stuff like that. And I took out the ridges, smoothed it out on going from 800 to 4,000 to 10,000 grit, and then I polished it on the paper, and it was beautiful. I said, wow. Interesting. So I studied his grit. I studied his nib under 125x magnification. And I said, wow, maybe I can try this. So then I started experimenting and working on stuff. And then I ended up with power tools and stuff like that to grind with the different grinding wheels and stuff like that. And I started making myself obliques and italics and oblique italics and reverse italics and Israeli italics and all that sort of stuff. Just grinding. And the whole point was that Larry at Drum Goals, he supported it because I would do that for his customers. So at that time, you could get a gold nib for a Pilot Vanishing Point fountain pen. If you screw, that's the one that clicks, that retracts, the fountain nib, for $29.95.
Wow.
Okay. Solid gold, 14 or 18 karat nib, $29.95. Now they're $149.95.
Yeah.
But back then they were $29.95. So I screwed up a couple of those, and Larry said, "No problem. You're just learning." So he would give them and I figured out. And once I showed them, once I demonstrated that I could do it consistently, then we started doing it for customers, and then the word started spreading, and then almost got like half of the fountain pen community in Houston started descending upon this. I would have people lines 10 deep. I have sign-up lists for people coming in. I want this to be an italic. My handwriting is horrible. Can you make it look better? No, I can't make your handwriting look better, but I can make the line on the paper look a little bit more fancy and less plain.
Yeah.
So that's how it kind of started. That was kicked off in like 2003.
That's fascinating.
And so that's why there's a few of us in the country that do it. We're called nibmeisters, that we tune the pens for everybody and stuff like that. Where's my thing? I think we talked before, and I told you. Here is. Larry's one of the biggest sellers of Mont Blanc in the South, and so this is. I told you. I showed you a picture of that. That's the Mont Blanc Texas pen. It's a Mont Blanc full size 149, done in a skeleton, which is just sort of a web of white gold, and in the cap they did different states, symbols and stuff like that. That's with the state of Texas.
Yes.
With the Lone Star in it, but it's done with diamonds, rubies, and sapphires. So that pen. There were 6 or 8 made. I think one or two were sold here in the United States. The rest were sold to either Chinese or Russians.
Wow.
Because they were just giving out money. They just collect. I mean, they just pay cash for everything. And that's I thought it was $33,000 for that pen.
Wow. So I'm looking at this pen. I'm going to kind of describe it, what I'm seeing here. So it's a fountain pen like you would see, and the webbing he's describing, it looks like it's glass, or is there anything in the webbing?
It's a webbing over a clear acrylic.
Okay.
That's the body of the pen.
Yeah.
Because it's a piston. So the piston has to rub against the cylinder on the inside. So that's called a skeleton.
Okay.
Okay. You can see through it, but you see the ribs of the pen. So that's what you're
I'm
describing.
not going to lie, this is the most beautiful pen I've ever seen. I'm just saying.
33,000 is yours.
And that Texas on there, they describe. So it's the Texas State red, white, and blue flag, like you'd see Lone Star in the middle of not Abilene, but was Odessa area, right? Yeah, that is a beautiful pen,
and it's inset with I forget how many diamonds, rubies, and sapphires are handed. And I don't know if they did one for every state, but this was a kind of a design that they did. And the top of the pen is mother of pearl rather than just white plastic. So anyway, so we got the fiddle fart around with one of those, and I mean I've modified pens that were $7,000, $8,000, $10,000 for people who literally they have more money than they have sense, and they would throw them away if they didn't write well for them. I mean, how can you throw away a $6,000 fountain pen in the garbage? I'm not going to tell you what medical profession he is, but he knows whose name it is, because I threatened him and said, if I ever find out that you're going to throw away a pen because you don't like the way it writes, rather than just give it to me, I'm never going to fix one of your other fountain pens. And he's a left-hander as well, a very peculiar left-handed writer as well. And I modify his pens. I said, I'll just make it so it writes. Don't get so frustrated. You throw a $6,000 pen in the garbage in the recovery unit of the hospital. I mean, seriously. Anyway.
So how'd you get started being interested in that? So, I mean, was it just writing fountain pens while you were in school?
My mother wrote with Waterman when she was at Hunter College in New York. So when I was about, I forget how old, 10, 12, 13, something like that, we were at a street sale in Philadelphia. People just put all their crap on the street. Flea market. Not really a flea market.
Okay.
These were a commercial area where stores just put out stuff that wasn't selling, and everybody would sell on the street. Okay. That wasn't a flea market. It was new stuff, but discounted. And we came up past this one stationery store, and on their table were these fountain pens. And my mother said, I used a Waterman when I was in Hunter College 50 years ago. I want to get you this fountain pen. I said, oh, okay. And it was a Waterman Laureate. That was the model. They don't make it anymore. It was purple. I still have it. Got me some cartridges to put in it. And oh my freaking God, it leaked everywhere. It was all over my hands. It was all over my book bag. I'd wash it off. I'd put it down. This is a piece of crap. It was me. I didn't understand it because I would treat it by putting it flat on a table. I'd stick it in my book bag, cap down. So all the ink leaked into the cap. So when I opened it up, my hand was like full of ink. This thing leaks like crazy. I put it away. But I like pens. So at that time was the first, I don't know if your listeners remember this, the first Vic Rollerball that came out. It was the cap you put on and off. It was long and cylindrical. It was $1.79 when I was like 14 or 15 years old. $1.79 for a pen, but it flowed beautiful black ink, dark, like glass over everything. It was the premium pen. Rather, we used to get like big stick pens for 12 for 49 cents. Yes. So this was $1.79 for one pen. It was like, oh my God. And then I have a lot of physicians in my family. The drug reps started giving these out. They put like Zofran and all the drug names on them. They give them out to their doctors and stuff like that. So I would collect them for my aunts and uncles and stuff like that. So I would get these fabulous drug rep pens, and wow, this is really cool. And then there were paper mates, and we start doing there were different click pens, and I started getting interested in different mechanisms. So I started just buying a whole bunch of ballpoints and writing with them. And it's like, that's how I got into pens. But then there was this stupid ass Waterman Laureate that was sitting there that I said, this thing is crap. It leaks all over the place, whatever. And then it just sort of sat for many, many, many years. My interest, I was just buying regular ballpoints and stuff like that, kind of disposable ones that were interesting. And then in medical school in St. Louis, I went to Washington University in St. Louis. we always went to flea markets. My mother was a great garage sale goer and stuff like that. We go to flea markets, whatever. So I started going to some of the flea markets and antique shows there and just kind of hanging out and looking around. And then, what is this? Oh, that's a fountain pen. Okay, that's interesting. It doesn't look like the one I had. I'll get it. I think I paid $10 for it. It was a Waterman. It was a Parker 51, and I was writing with it. I dip it and I write with it. It would write beautifully, and then I had to dip it again and stuff like that because I didn't realize that the diaphragm in it was busted because it was a 40-year-old pen. So I went to out in West County in St. Louis. There was this stationery store, and there was still the old curmudgeonly guy in the back who worked in the back who repaired fountain pens, as it were. And I drove out there and I said, I'd like to get this pen repaired. And he looked at me and said, kid, it'd cost you more to repair that pen than that pen is worth. Meaning it was probably, worth $40, and he charged me $50 for it. Yeah. Like, whatever. So, okay. So then I found Fountain Pen Hospital in New York. And they have a repair section of tools and stuff like that. And I found ways, I got the tools and I repaired it. And then I found, this is what I tell to all the fountain pen folks, I found Father Terry. Father Terry was a Jesuit priest. I think he was somewhere in California. Don't quote me on that and don't flame me for getting it wrong. But he was the guy who took a vow of poverty, but he loved handwriting notes, fountain pens and stuff like that. And so he came up with all the tools to repair vintage pens as well. And you bought them from him literally at cost plus postage. Okay. If you sent him the cost of the pen in postage, he preferred to have that so he wouldn't take away from his ecumenical duties to go to the post office to go buy postage. He'd rather he sell you a tool for $5 plus 15 cents in postage. So he'd rather get $5.15 in stamps from you. But every one of his tools came with a small, little, lovingly written note on how to use this tool, how to use this gasket, how to repair this type of pen, how to do this, how to do that. And he would send them out with you for free. So you get like a thick envelope with like a little tool in it. But all this literature that he handwrote on how to, so I learned from him as well. And then I became more popular and whatever. So I started going to garage sales, antique stores, and I started scavenging fountain pens at that time that no one else wanted. They were just in boxes, shoe boxes. I should buy these things up. So I bought tons of Parkers, tons of Watermans and stuff like that, old bladder pens, diaphragms, school pens and whatever. And then guess what? I started to learn how to repair them. So I learned in medical school how to repair them. And then I may get a relationship with some antiques dealers who did a lot of stuff for furniture and stuff like that. And guess what? When someone wants to sell grandma's or grandpa's old writing desk, they want to get rid of the desk. So the guy comes and picks it up, and guess what's rolling around in one of the drawers there? A bunch of pens. So a bunch of these dealers would basically have shoe boxes full of pens because they're interested in the furniture. Mm-hmm. And then I would come in and I'd pour through their stuff, and they'd give me a price, and I'd go scavenging from them. So that's how I built up my vintage pen collection. So anyway, that's how I learned to repair pens. And that got me through medical school, residency, that sort of stuff. And then when I got out into the real world, through my fellowship and stuff like that, and started writing, then I said, what are these pens? I'm going to start writing with them again. So I started getting them out. I started using them again. And I started buying modern pens. And then I started seeing how crappy my handwriting was. And then I started modifying. So that's my pen journey in the world.
It's fascinating, man.
It's fascinating. But now we were talking, there's now a resurgence.
Yes.
I don't want to insult anybody except hipsters. But right now, there's sort of a hipster resurgence in journaling. Moleskine, Leuchtturm, all these fancy papers, Tomo River papers from Japan. Quality paper, quality journals. A5, if you're out there, you know what A5 is, raise your hand. That's a standard size of a journal. People wanting to do a travel log, a travel journal, doing watercolors while they're sitting at lunchtime in between their boring, dreary jobs and just want to be a little artsy and stuff like that. Do sketches, journal their day, journal what they're thinking for the weekend, all that sort of stuff. They'll paste stuff in, stamps. It's kind of like scrapbooking, but it's not like you're. The whole point is not to like collect pictures and make them fancy looking. It's to actually be creative and artistic.
Yes.
So that's what journaling is now. And now the cool thing is to have, when you're journaling, have 4 or 5 different pens in your pocket or your roll that you carry with you only for fountain pens, which are available at John Gould's in the Village, 215 Rice Boulevard. Anyway. I just had to throw it. Anyway.
Oh, no, it's fine, man.
But have it with different inks, different colors, and all this sorts of stuff. And it's like, okay, fine, whatever. It's I don't want to say it seems like it's a reactionary thing to email, handwriting, hand art, hand lettering, the art of sending someone the written note.
Well, it's not just writing. There's a big resurgence for handcrafted everything coming these days. Where there's a group of people that are tired of the just punch out factory made crap.
Yeah,
they want your handmade knives, your handmade pens. They want handcrafted furniture. You want handcrafted boots. Cowboy boots in Texas, right?
Which I have 100 custom pair made of myself with.
That's what I'm saying. So people appreciate that more. Because there's a couple things, right? They enjoy the story of people like yourself. You have all this vast knowledge of all these pens, knives, etc., and they enjoy talking to the person that makes this thing, or if they have, or listen to their stories or whatever the case, right? And they say, yeah, man, this guy's cool. He knows so much. He's obviously passionate about it. I want to buy my stuff from him versus buying from the factory that, whatever, that has no story. There's no soul to it, right?
Yeah.
There's soul to handmade things that's making that resurgence. So it's pretty awesome. And that's kind of my interest in a lot of this stuff is just the stories behind these people doing all this.
Well, I never actually thought I'd get into be a maker. Mm-hmm. I'm not much of a hipster, although I do have my Wolverine 1,000-mile boots that I wear with my rolled up denim cuffs and my selvage jeans and my buffalo plaid.
You're not making a good case for yourself.
I'm not making a good case for myself. I have my hipster tendencies. My people look at me weird when I do that. When they see me, I used to go testify on the stand, like trying to look like a Texas Ranger.
Oh yeah.
Have the suit, the 20X silver belly resistol cowboy hat with my cowboy boots on and my Ranger belt buckle set and stuff like that, because that's what people. I don't want to say it was a costume. It kind of made me feel good.
Yeah.
But people recognize that as a look, as a thing here in Texas. When you see Texas Ranger, when you see someone dressed like that, you say Texas Ranger. They might not know what that looks like up in Minnesota or Oregon or something like that, but that's the look. I've gone through these phases.
That's not where you're testifying at.
That's not where I'm testifying at. But when you're in court and you're testifying in a criminal case and you look like a Texan, you have a little bit more credibility. To the jury. I'm just sitting here looking. I'll show you this in a little bit. But you're right. The whole maker thing now, the center of the hipster maker world is Williamsburg, Brooklyn. Okay. Williamsburg, Brooklyn has handcrafted bourbons, handcrafted pies, handcrafted furniture, all by people under 35, 37, doing the whole hipster maker thing, doing the one-of stuff, the special stuff, having high quality, low volume turnout and stuff like that. How did I get started in this? Being a physician, you think algorithmically, which is a very rote formula thing. Patient comes in with belly pain. You don't have to worry about toothache. You don't have to worry about pain in their big toe. You're trying on belly pain. What's my algorithm I go through? Belly pain. Is it a man or is it a woman? Is it ovary? Is it right side or left side of the belly? Is it ovary? Is it appendix? Is it diverticulitis, diverticulosis? Is it a torsed cecum? Do they have acute gallbladder? Does it get worse when they eat fat? Does it get worse? Is it all the worst all the time? Does it feel better this way or that way? You go through this algorithmic thing, which is really kind of formulaic. Mm-hmm. Okay, and the formulas have been set up over the centuries of physicians examining people. The really good physicians can step outside the formula and see something different, like weird things like porphyria. Okay, rare disease can present as a whole bunch of other stuff. You have to think about it to understand it, rather than take the person to the OR to take out their appendix, and you need to know that they have a medical condition rather than a surgical condition. And that's how we got trained. Okay. And we're not trained to be creative. I like to write, and that was it. I wrote some poetry and stuff like that, but that was about my only creative output, and I played the piano a little bit. But then in forensics, I got into I struggled. Well, just to go back, when I did my fellowship in Miami, they gave us a Victorinox slicer. $14.95. They bought them in bulk. That's what they gave to everybody there, and they flexed like crazy. But they had the chef rod knife makers, and they had some pull through knife sharpeners and stuff like that. They were horrible, but that's what they wanted us to use all the time. Because that's what everybody used. The staff pathologists used them. The fellows used them. That was it. And even everybody everyone who's listening who did a fellowship in Miami, listening to my words knows, and they probably still have, and they might even still use their own Victorinox slicer that they got from Miami, or have bought new ones. Horrible knives. Couldn't keep them sharp. Made out of crappy steel, but they're throwaway. So the more you sharpen them, the thinner it gets. You just throw it and buy another one. So when I got out, one thing I noticed I hated about it was that it flexed. So cutting an organ makes it flex. I don't like that. I wanted a stiff knife. So I got a Dexter Russell two-handled cheese knife. It was 15 and a half inches long, but it's the one where you cut the wheels of cheese into the wedges that you then wrap in cellophane and put in your market, then weigh out. So I had those are $55 from the chefs from the restaurant supply places. I had the machine shop cut off one handle, and it was a stiff knife, and I said, okay, good. Now I have the stiff knife I want. Let me figure out how to sharpen, because I'm going to keep this knife sharp. And I went through 10 years of ceramic, stone, power sharpeners, pull-through sharpener, anything I could possibly spend money on to figure out how to keep that stupid thing sharp. It would get sharp for one case, and then it would be dull. And it's like, this is a pain in the ass. I finally settled on a bench grinder and stuff like that had a stropping wheel that could get it really razor sharp for the last two cases, but that was about it. Then one day, and at that time, just to give a parallel, I'm using at that time in my kitchen Chicago cutlery, and I think I bought one or two global knives and stuff like that, and maybe a sprung for a $99 Shun 8-inch chef's knife. And I started getting water stones to sharpen them on. I had a combo 800 4000 grit water stone, and I would get it sharp. It would be beautiful to use, and I would get dull, and I have to sharpen it again, so on and so forth. And that's just kind of the way it went. I spent all my time trying to sharpen my damn my autopsy knives. Then one day I go to New York, take a trip there, back in 2012, I think, and I'm doing the tour. I'm getting interested in knives, and I bought one knife, a really premium knife from Cut Brooklyn, and mail order, and it was like, there's something special about this. This is not different. This is not my global. This is not my Shun. This is something, okay. So I took a knife, and he was from Brooklyn. He's in Williamsburg. No, I'm sorry. He's in Gowanus. That's Joel Buckowitz there. And I want to visit that place. So I made a 4 or 5 day trip to New York and saw some shows and ate some good food. Went to Zabar's. Anybody's out there knows Zabar's, raise your hand. But Zabar's is to be the first food emporium in the entire world, the most fabulous food emporium. The second floor is you could buy a pot that you could steam like 3 live children in. They're huge. Handmade, hand-hammered, copper pots from France that are, they're probably, you probably have the volume of about 4 55-gallon drums.
Wow.
They're incredible. Wow. All the way down to fine little tools and stuff like that. So I had my routine that I would go through when I go to New York. But I went out to Joel's place, and I looked at his stuff, and I didn't buy one because I was just kind of looking and to see what he was doing and to see how it was set up. And then I came back in, and I went to Brooklyn Kitchen or Bowery Kitchen, Brooklyn Kitchen, something like that, down in the Chelsea Market. And there on the walls was all the knives, and in the crate were all the knives: Japanese knives, Kikuichis, Tojiros, Takamuras, any number of a dozen different Japanese makers. It's like, wow. So I ended up getting a Glee Stain, which is one with the big kellums on it. It was very, 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 very distinctive looking knife. The sides of it are kind of really hollowed out a lot. And I got a Kikuichi, and I got a Makusta, and different stuff. So when I came home with him, I started working with him, and it's like, whoa, what's wrong? These aren't my globals. These are not my Shuns. These are actually performance items. So then I realized, it just hit me while I'm sitting there at my cutting board. It's not the freaking sharpness. It's the quality of the steel, you idiot. So I was thinking there, it's like, okay, what am I going to do? What knife do I use most in my life? Oh, it's my autopsy knife. So I'm going to get an autopsy knife made that's stiff and made out of good steel. I'm gonna move this aside. I'm gonna go ahead for a second. And
we're pulling out. That's a big knife.
Yeah, there's a big knife. And there's a big sharp knife too. Yes. So I had this made, and this is made out of 440C steel, which is fabulous butcher steel. But this is the shape of a halef. And a halef, be careful, it's very sharp.
Yep.
A halef, is for your audience, a halef is the knife used by shochetz, and a shochet is the observant Jew. Sorry, that's a derogatory. The observant Jewish person who does kosher slaughter. And halefs come in small, medium, and large sizes for chickens, for lambs, and for cows. So, but they're long, and they're actually defined in Leviticus and the Babylonian Talmud as well. But what they have to look like, they can't have a point on them, even though there's a point here. But they have to be square at the front, square at the back, have a long, straight edge with no dings in it. It has to be 1.5 to 2 times longer than the width of the neck of the animal that you want to cut to slaughter. Okay, so that's why there's small, medium, and large. Mm-hmm. And it has to. I forget what all the other little specifics are for it, but it's It's a slicer. And it looks exactly like my crappy Dexter Russell knife that I used. In fact, and I learned later when I was doing research on halefs and talking to the rabbis at the Chicago Kosher Union and stuff like that, that a lot of shochetz would actually take a Dexter Russell cheese knife and cut one handle off of it and use that as their halef.
Do the same thing.
Because they don't get paid very much. They do the same exact thing. They can throw it away if it gets dull or chipped or broken or whatever, and they can get a new one. So anyway, I got this, and I loved it. It was heavy, because you can feel how heavy this stupid thing was. It's about a 1/4 inch thick 440C steel. The blade is 14 inches. The blade is 14 inches long. And this cut like crazy. And I'm thinking, oh my God, it was the steel the whole time. And okay, no problem. So that's when I realized, oh, well, wait a minute. My chef's knives, it's the steel, you idiot. So I'm gonna start designing and having made chef's knives, custom chef's knives made out of better freaking steel. And that's what happened. And I got to know one of the knife makers here in Houston, a really nice guy. And I started working in a shop, and if I bought something, I bought something for him. If I bought belts, I bought belts for him. If I bought steel, I bought steel for him as well. And that's how we kind of shared. He let me use his expertise. He let me use his machinery. And that's how we kind of learned. And I started setting up my own shop and doing my own stuff, developing my own style. Okay, and he has a very much more rustic style, which goes great. He goes great here in Texas for people who have stuff at their ranches or have a more rustic decor to their kitchen or their homes and stuff like that. I have a more refined Japanese style because that's just what I like. So that's how I developed my style. I started developing my shop, and then started making my own knives and doing tons of research on steel. It's like, what makes the better edge holding? Because, I don't want to sit there, because I hated for 10 years having to sharpen a dull knife all the time. Okay? Sharpen my knife for my autopsy. Oh, it's not cutting my onion now. Oh, I have to sharpen it. I have to stop and sharpen my chef's knives and stuff like that. Is there a better way? Because I already showed that I can have better steel to make a better cutting instrument. Well, let me go crazy then. So again, this is part of my personality. It's like, ooh, let's go toward powdered metal steels. Let's go toward Swedish steels. Let's go toward higher alloy steels. Ooh, what type of alloys are better? Ooh, lots of vanadium. Ooh, you throw in a little tungsten. That's even better. What about niobium? Ooh, that's exotic, but that's really cool. Well, if 0.4% vanadium is good, how about 1.6% or 2.3% vanadium? Is that better? Hell yeah. Well, if 2.3% is better, what about 4%? What about 10%? Hell yeah. Hell yeah. So that's how I got into my niche into chef's knife making, is using these incredibly high alloy steels that have incredible edge holding. I'm not making choppers. I'm not making camp knives. You're not going to whack. If you use one of my chef's knives to whack the branches off the trees outside, your warranty is invalid. Okay, I'm not making those knives for my chef's knives. I'll make those knives, but I'll make them out of different steel. I'll make them out of tougher steel, not edge holding steel. For the chef, I want the edge to be fabulous for as long as possible. I want them to not have to sharpen their knife. What I've learned is that some chefs are habitual blade strokers. They stroke their blade on a chef steel all the time during a service when their hands are kind of idle. It's just like smokers. They have to have something in their hand to do. Some chefs just want to sharpen their knives once a week, once every 10 days on their day off or whatever. So I make knives that you go through an entire service. You're not going to have to sharpen it. You're not going to do whatever. You can probably even go a week or two without sharpening them, because if you're, people get lazy, I'm sure chefs are listening to this and I say, yeah, I know a line cook like that, and so on and so forth. Anyway, these high performance steels are too high performance, too hardened alloys for the commercial knife makers to use, because it'll destroy their machinery. But the individual custom knife maker, we do one blade at a time. We use different grits. We do use high power grinders and stuff like that, and we obsess over the grind, the edge thickness, the edge geometry, and all that sort of stuff. That we'll use high alloy steels that don't cost 15 cents a pound if you buy them in, the 10,000 pound bulk. Steels that cost, sometimes cost like $70 a pound. Yeah. But the performance is outstanding.
So let me ask you this. So the percentage of the different alloys that you're putting in that steel, is that something you're already buying a sheet, let's say a sheet of steel that's already has that percentage in that, or are you actually
look behind you to your right and pick up one of those, any one of those bars. Okay. So that's the steel. That's one of the steels. And look at all the bars behind you as well. Guess what? They're all gray. They're all steel.
Yes.
Okay. But they're all different. They all have different things. So this one is. This is 1.2562. That's a different. That's a European designation that has a certain amount of tungsten and vanadium to it.
Okay.
Okay. Now put that down. And see that kind of that one that's kind of looks like it's cut up right there, right by your hand. That one, yeah. Pick that one up. This was a sheet of steel that I've cut different blades out of, and that's M4 steel. So this is how I get it. And I cut it in sheets, and then I'll trace out the steel, the knife thing, and I'll cut it out with an angle grinder, and then I'll shape it and pre-grind it and send it off for hardening, stuff like that. But it's all steel. Yes. It all looks the same, but I have to know what the composition is coming from the
manufacturer.
The steel mill is either crucible, or you just let it flop on the floor. Either Crucible or Carpenter in the United States are the big ones. In Sweden, it's Böhler Uddeholm and Sandvik. Those are the two mills that are the big ones out there. And there's some other mills in Germany as well. So I know what they are. They all look the same, but the performance is different. And for them, for many years, knife makers were completely the bastard stepchildren of the steel manufacturers. They were making steel for bridges, for roads, for buildings, and all that sort of stuff. And then knife makers were stuck saying, a friend of mine, he works over there at the mill, and he had this piece of steel. He knows I make knives. So he brought me this piece, and I made a knife with it. Man, it got great edge holding. Wow, I can hammer it really well, blah, 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 blah. What is it? Because it's good knife steel, but they're using it to make girders, or they're using it to make armor plates for, Abrams tanks and stuff like that. Wow, it's really cool. So the manufacturers would make steel for their big clients. But then people will yell at me for not getting the right year, but I think it was like in the 40s or 50s, one of the steel people said, why don't we make steel for like the butchers? Just for knives. So they came up with 440C. They came up with a lot of different, the 400 series, 420A, 420B, 420C, 440A, 440B, 440C, plus a bunch of other stuff. And 440C, they settled as high corrosion resistance because blood from carcasses is very salty, and good edge holding and easy sharpenability. because the butchers are butchering carcasses that are hanging from the ceiling. So what they do is they have their chef steel on one hip on a belt, and they have their metal scabbard on the other hip with 2 or 3 different knives in it of different shapes and scimitar and paring and whatever. And those they'll stroke it on the thing, and they'll make cuts in this large carcass as they begin to break it down on the production line. Mm-hmm. First real steel made for specifically chef's knives. Okay. And then people realized there's a market for this. So the mills started developing better steels for the chef person because they wanted edge holding. They wanted abrasion resistance, because that's what you do when you dull your knife is you abrade the edge on a bone, on a cutting board, on whatever. On cartilage, whatever you're cutting, that's abrasion. That's different than being tough. Tough is that you don't want it to snap when you wedge it into when you're cutting wood for your campfire. And then you got it stuck in that branch, and you kind of wiggle it back and forth. You don't want if you take a chef's knife out there to a campfire and start cutting branches with it, it'll snap in half.
Yes.
So toughness, ductility, abrasion resistance, and edge holding. All different properties of this fabulous stuff that we call steel, but they started optimizing it for cutting. So then things started coming out differently and more steel started coming out over the decades. So now we have steels that are made specifically for chef's knives. Some of the best steels for chef's knives are still industrial steels. Like M4 is a steel that's used for tool makers. It's a steel you make things out of M4 to make tools to make things out of steel.
Yeah,
because it's a very high very high vanadium and very high tungsten. So it's very strong stuff, but it happens to have a very excellent edge holding. So now it's excellent for steel, whereas versus things like Elmax comes from Boa Udahome, is a steel designed for cutlery. Has a little less tungsten, a little less vanadium than M4, but it was developed for knife makers. Fabulous steel. I wouldn't want a house made out of Elmax girders. I wouldn't want to have Elmax be a structural support steel for anything that I was building. But for my knife, fabulous. It's totally different designs. So that's what I gravitate toward. Is I don't forge, okay, because I don't want to set my house on fire like that goober up in New York set his whole neighborhood on fire doing the forged and fire thing in his backyard, which we should talk about too, about that goofy show.
Yes,
which I love. I watch everything, but it creates a lot of interesting things to go along with
some
it.
False information out there.
Not really. It gives a false impression about knife making in certain respects. But I like steels that have technically better edge holding performance properties than the steels that people forge with. Okay. Because the two are mutually exclusive.
Yes.
You're not going to forge M4 steel. Too high tungsten, too high vanadium. You're going to forge with what's called 1095, something that's very low tungsten, very low vanadium. You can forge W2 steel, which has a little bit of added tungsten to it, which is great for edge holding. It's better than 1095, but it's still not so much that you can't actually pound it out into knife shape without it cracking like an old dried out piece of Play-Doh as you pound on it and stuff like that. So the people who forge are kind of limited to the high alloy steels that they cannot use. But because they forge, they can do Damascus, they can do different patterns and stuff like that. So they make a beautiful knife, but it's out of regular steel.
Yes.
Okay. I make the beauty in my knives from the handle work, the profiles, the balance, the geometry and stuff like that. But then it has the performance, which is what lasts much longer than what the Damascus looks like. Although I do use Damascus that I get from other makers, especially Damasteel and Bauback, which Damasteel is Swedish and Bauback is German. They make these beautiful steels with good quality cutlery steels to them as well. Damasteel uses RWL 34, which is like CPM 154, made here in by Crucible, and Bauback uses N690, which is made by Bowler Udahome steel, which is the European kind of equivalent of VG10 steel from Takafu in Japan and stuff like that. So you can have a beautiful knife with a good performance, but you're not going to get a Damascus blade made out of M4 or S110V, which is the highest performance stainless steel that you can get and stuff like that. But they're really hard to work. Yeah. But I just like doing it because it's a challenge. And my chef customers that get those knives, they freaking love them. They don't have sharper blades. They don't have blades that last longer in performance wise. Here, and I'll show you my Instagram, and I'll show you one. You can read this. So
put your Instagram name out.
My Instagram name is Penman88, PENNMAN 88. Yeah. Which is a triple entendre. Okay. I grew up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Okay. My college is the University of Pennsylvania, or Penn, and I'm the Penn doctor.
There you go.
But that's with one minute. Anyway, so I made this, and this one went to Andrew Zimmern, who's one of my clients, one of my multiple chefs clients.
Andrew Zimmern from Bizarre Foods.
And all that sort of stuff, and Food Network and all those cool stuff.
Very, very famous chef.
And he apparently one of my early chefs that used my knives, that brought my knives, was Chris Shepard here in Houston at Underbelly, and he's anytime he asks me about his knives, he says he loves them and he promotes them. He's the knife he says that he won't let any of his chefs touch. Any of his other knives that he uses, they can touch, but not my knives. So anyway, I made this little field knife for Zimmern because I would see that he goes out into the field to do the butchery and do the hunting and do the stuff in the remote parts of the world and see their culinary traditions or whatever. And I made this to send to him. So he had a good knife in his pocket. He was using a Kershaw chive. Yes. Okay. And this, like, really, you want to be this stuck in the middle of the Jordanian Valley with a Kershaw chive? I'm gonna, here's a knife that's made out of M4 steel, and he's now using this. So there's his comment right there on that, my last Instagram post.
Let's see,
Chef AZ. That's
Chef AZ, best field carry knife I've ever owned. That exact piece is strapped to my belt right now and butchered a deer in Scotland 2 days ago. Skinned it all without needing a hone or a stone. Impressive and utility driven, as it is beautifully made. And I'm looking at a picture of that is a beautiful knife.
So that's it. That's a short M4 field knife.
I've skinned deer using a knife very similar to this. I'm sure it's not the quality of steel and everything, but that style of short knife blade is excellent to work with. And
correct. It certainly is, and that's why I made it, because I know that some people like that. How about this one? What does that look like to you?
This looks like, I don't know. It looks as though the handle is twice as long as the blade.
Correct.
And the blade is kind of a similar curvature to what that one is, I think. It's
got a lot of belly to it. Yeah. That's a scalpel. Okay. It's not sharp. I haven't sharpened that one yet, so you can run your hands on it. Uh-huh. So I went to the surgeons, the field surgeons starting in the Civil War would have a kit that went with them when they went down to their field hospitals and stuff like that, and they would unroll it, unbox it, whatever.
Things of nightmares if anybody's ever seen them.
Absolutely. they use crazy instruments to, like, pull your tonsils and to straighten out your testicles and to reorganize your anus. Crazy stuff. Okay, things of nightmares. And if you were a woman back then, horrible things with nightmares, because they were just so sexually oriented to basically get the hysteria out of women, done by what men thought was wrong with women. It was a very paternalistic, horrible. They made these horrible gynecologic instruments. But that's for another discussion. But for
it's another podcast.
Correct. But for the Civil War surgeon, there was no antibiotics, there was no anesthesia, and if someone. Basically, you had to support somebody so that they would survive a gunshot wound, especially to the belly. But what killed most people on the battlefield, was not, other than being killed by a gunshot wound or an artillery wound, dead right where you were, was that you died days or weeks later from infection. Okay, and the only thing that they could do to the most successful surgeons were the ones that cut out the bad part of the body, the damaged part of the body, and they were The ones that you survived were the ones that had extremity injuries. So the most successful surgeons were the ones that had a kit that they could do amputations with as fast as possible to minimize blood loss and to minimize infectious spread, okay? Minimize gangrene.
And they cauterized wounds was basically...
They took a metal rod and they stuck it in the fire and they just burned the ends out of it.
And that was it. And that was their source of mitigating infection.
And they did it without washing their hands. They literally go down the line in the field infirmaries, cut off arm, leg, hand, wrist, finger, toes, blah, blah.
Not washing blood off blades.
This was pre-sanitary conditions.
Yes.
Okay. So the field surgical kits had instruments. Guess what? There was no disposable Bard Parker blades back then, scalpels and stuff like that. So you had to have a knife that you could sharpen and stuff like that. So the way that they did it was, so what they had was, Carl Fabergé did these as well. The one who made Fabergé eggs. Okay. He was actually a metalsmith. He made these gorgeous Fabergé field surgery kits for the Russian field surgeons in the Crimean Wars. But they'd have a scalpel that had gold and sterling and enamel all over it, plus a tool steel blade. They were gorgeous, and that they would present them, the czars would present to their field surgeon doctors and stuff like that, and Fabergé made them. Anyway, so what they were a long-handled knife, because what you had to do was they do an amputation as quick as possible. 2 cuts, saw, and get the cautery and then bandage them up as quickly as possible so they lost as little blood as possible. So you had a assistant. Let's say they had to do a below the knee amputation. You had an assistant that held the gangrenous leg up or the damaged leg up by the ankle, and the surgeon would come in without washing his hands, and he'd take a knife, a scalpel that had a long blade like this. So he'd come underneath the thigh, the calf on one side, and come up to the lateral side and just kind of come into it. I'm not grossing out your audience. I hope not. Come down and just go straight around the knife. Yeah. Right. You can't do that with a little 3.5-inch pocket knife.
Correct.
So they use these long-handled knives to cut around the thigh and go straight down to the bone. Okay, as fast as possible. This is where bite the bullet comes from, because they would give the patient a bullet to bite on, so he wouldn't go screaming bloody murder, which they often would do anyway. You go straight down to the bone with this long handle, because you came around it. You go around the top with your long handled knife, and then your assistant would hand you the hacksaw, and you'd cut through the bones, the tibia and the fibula. Then you cauterize the ends, and then you'd bandage it up as best as possibly you can with your dirty bandages, and pray that they didn't die from a secondary infection. So the resharpenable scalpels look like this. They had, this is a 90 millimeter blade. They might have been actually more like 50 or 60 millimeter blades, but they had a much longer handle than the blade was. And that's where the field surgeon's thing was. This continues for more than a century, because us as pathologists, a lot of pathologists travel around to different hospitals, and they do mostly surgical pathology, looking at slides under the microscope, doing frozen sections or whatever. But they would do the occasional autopsy, the hospital autopsy there in the morgue. And most hospitals didn't have morgue equipment. They just had a place where the body was. There was a cool room, a table with water and drainage and stuff like that. So the pathologist would have to bring his kit with him. And then guess what? It looked exactly like the surgeon's kits from the Civil War time. Yeah. It hadn't changed. It hadn't progressed in 100+ years. You had a bone saw, you had scalpels, you had retractors, you had forceps, that sort of stuff. It hadn't changed very much. And you had these scalpels, long-handled, short-bladed, that the pathologist would sharpen before each autopsy, and then he'd sharpen it after he'd cleaning up his stuff or whatever. So that's sort of a historical thing back for a pathologist to do this. But then me as doing autopsies, we'd use disposable stuff. Then I started using my knives, making my autopsy knives, and then I saw this post on Instagram by a fabulous Israeli knife maker, does beautiful artistic stuff. His name is Lee Lerman, and he's got a friend and fabulous knife collector in Israel who's a physician whose name is Slava. So he goes under Doc Slava, and he made him a beautiful scalpel, shorter handle, but out of anodized screws, Damascus steel blade. I think it was a titanium handle. I forget what. Don't quote me on that. I'm sorry, I don't remember. And I realized, yeah, that's what we used to use. But I'm not going to use that stuff because he made it artistic. I want to make it to be utilitarian.
Yes.
So I designed this scalpel to do my eviscerations with. So this is what I use. This one, not this. I made two of them. One of them I use, and this is my exemplar that I use. So this long, skinny handle. It's about a centimeter. I'm sorry, I do everything in metric because of the Japanese knives that I like to make. So this is about a half inch in width, stuff like that, and it's about 8 inches long.
Yeah.
The blade is about 3.5 to 4 inches long. It's got a big belly on the front of it, and it's fabulous. I can eviscerate. I can remove the subcutaneous tissue if I need to look for bruising underneath between the skin and the ribs, on the abdominal wall, stuff like that. It's also great for shelling out the pelvis and taking out the prostate and stuff like that. It's also great for going up underneath the jaw and removing the tongue and the larynx and the trachea and stuff like that because it's long and thin, so I can twist it and turn it this way. But the steel itself stays sharp for 7 autopsies. Not disposable. Yeah. I can do 7 autopsies with the full eviscerations with this knife. I can hit the bone. I can run it sometimes across stents in the heart or sternal wires for people who've had median sternotomies and have had bypass and stuff like that. And I still have a sharp blade because of this M4 steel that I love to use. So this is the highest tech scalpel that's been made. Because no one else is going to make a scalpel out of M4 steel. Yeah. But then I realized, you know what? You could eviscerate. You could eviscerate. That's the same steel that was that knife for Zimmern. So wouldn't you love to eviscerate a deer with that thing? But no one would do it because it doesn't have the big bulbous handle. It doesn't have the big upswept blade and stuff like that. Yeah. Curved to it. Doesn't look like your Alaskan Skinner, your Nessmuk, or anything like that. Those typical Skinner knives. But I guarantee you, eviscerating a deer with that, your jaw will drop, and it looks insubstantial. Yeah, because it's long and it's skinny, but it's the quality of the steel that makes the performance of it. Yes, sir. Okay, fascinating. Yeah, I've never seen anybody with a blade like this or a knife like that, and I guarantee you're absolutely right. It would go through. Have you ever seen those disposable folding knives where you can put a scalpel blade in there? Yes, I have. Okay. Well, guess what? They sell those for hunters to eviscerate with. You buy a box of number 70 blades, 70 razor blades. It clips onto the holder on the thing. It folds down so you can put it in your belt sheath or whatever. Then when you get your deer back or you get your carcass back to where you're gonna eviscerate or whatever, you open up your knife. You put a fresh scalpel blade in there, and then you cut until you hit bone, and then it's dull. Well, guess what? You take off your 79-cent dull scalpel blade. You put another 79-cent scalpel blade, and you continue your evisceration. Yes. Okay. So there are scalpels that are marketed for hunters. I did not know that. Okay. And they're made in China stuff and stuff like that. But so I'm a knife maker. Why do I want to make a disposable knife? I'm going to make a knife you can reuse. And stuff like that. And of course, you're making custom. This has micarta on it, and I put some texture on it so it doesn't. Well, it feels good. Doesn't slip in your hand too much. Yeah, it feels good. It feels nice, and it's. I could imagine myself working with this and being able to, that's one thing you find out pretty quickly when you start diving into deer carcasses. I'm sure you, with your profession, that a good knife will make work a lot easier. And it's the essential to where my kind of, I wouldn't call it a fascination, but my interest in knives began with is butchering. Deers, I've been skinning deer and butchering deer since I was 11 years old. And I've gotten more and more into, started processing my own deer meat, making sausage and patties and steaks and all that good stuff at the house. And good knives we have a slew of knives, and I've got 2 or 3 of them nailed down that I like, but I want to get better knives because the better the tool, the easier the job, right? Absolutely. What I tell people for years is the only thing a good forensic pathologist needs is a sharp knife and a good camera. Okay. And my morgue techs will argue, well, you also need a good morgue tech as well. I said, well, yeah, you need a good morgue tech as well, but you can't buy those off the shelf. Anyway, so you're exactly correct. The right tool for the right job, and if it's going to be a knife, it's got to be sharp. It's got to have an edge. Because why? Because a dull knife forces you to work harder, to press harder. You want to then your dull knife, when you're cutting a tomato, is not cutting the skin of the tomato. So you end up, how many of you have sit there with your knife and then poked the tomato to make a hole, to then run your dull knife through to make a slice, and then you keep poking it to make slices and stuff like that? Well, you end up crushing your tomato, you crush your garlic, you crush your basil, you do this. If you're boning a steak or whatever, you're pushing harder through it. And guess what happens when you push a knife harder? That's dull. It's happened to me. You end up shoving it through your hand.
Yes.
And I've stuck myself with knives before because they weren't sharp, because they weren't cutting smoothly. I had to put more force behind it and stuff like that. Well, when you put more force behind it to cut your tissue or your vegetables, because your knife is dull, you have to use an opposite amount of force with your non-cutting hand.
Correct.
To hold it. So guess what happens? You're sitting there, all of a sudden you're pushing harder, and guess where your fingertips are? So if you're lucky, all you do is shave off part of your fingernail, or if you're unlucky, you take the tip of your finger off. Not the whole phalange, but the actual just sort of fleshy part, just your fingernail. If it's not sharp. If it's a sharp knife, guess what? You're just holding gently and casually with your non-cutting hand, and you're slicing with your knife hand. And you don't have to over push. You don't have to over manipulate the food or the tissue or the whatever, and it's a better thing for you. That's why I like knives that stay sharper longer.
Yes.
So you don't have to sit there, and because on a busy line, when you're making a feast at home for a holiday or for a family gathering or whatever, all of a sudden you're an hour into it. You don't want to have to stop to then push everything aside, sharpen your knife, and then get back to it. You want to have a sharp knife at the beginning. You want to go all the way through to the end, to when you serve, to when you finish your 8 or 10 hours on the line and stuff like that. Because when you're a line cook or when you're a chef, you can't like raise your hand and say, "Can we stop taking orders so I can have like 30 minutes to sharpen my kit?"
Yeah,
that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So
one of the more fascinating videos, or more impressive videos, I guess, that you have on your Instagram, and I don't know that you may have other things on there that are more impressive, but at least to me, I would almost call it filleted a tomato and a grape without touching the tomato or the grape.
Correct.
You just took the knife and just sliced right over it, thin slices, just as easy as can be. And like I said, the most impressive part about it was you weren't holding the tomato. It was just the knife force. And the grape doesn't move, the tomato doesn't move. And I was like, wow, those are some sharp knives.
They're all sharp knives. And I'll say that I'll say something that you can make anything sharp. Okay, whether it holds the sharpness is a property of the material itself. For instance, one of the knives that I would go through that I found, which was nice and long and kind of stiff, was made in China, made from probably car parts. And it was a watermelon knife, so it was about 16 inches long, and it would hold an edge for one tomato. I could get it razor sharp to shave the hair off my arm, but when I actually used it, it was dull after one cut. It was ridiculous. So you can make anything sharp. You can make a welding. I've done plenty of homicides from the TDCJ and stuff like that. You can make a welding rod sharp. You can make it the edge of a piece of plexiglass sharp enough to pierce the skin. You can make anything sharp. Whether it stays sharp is a different issue. So again, that's what I go for my knives, are knives that stay sharp.
Yes.
So those knives that you see, those are a function of me demonstrating my skill of knife making a very thin edge that performs at a high level, and number two, about my sharpening ability.
Yes.
With the myriad of whetstones that I use to get an absolutely sharp edge that's razor sharp, hair popping sharp. Okay, you can do that with 440C. You can do that with plain old 1095 carbon steel. You can do that with number 1 white steel, which is a Japanese version of 1095. You can make any good quality cutlery steel sharp. However, how long it stays sharp is a product of the elemental composition of the knife, as well as the heat treating of the knife and how well it's heat treated. M4 steel that's poorly heat treated is like won't even cut your bagel in the morning. Okay, it's good enough to spread your cream cheese, but not gonna cut your bagel. A properly treated M4 knife you can cut, a 4x4 in half with. Wow. Okay, so that those are all the things that come into play with a good knife. So I like to show those things just to show we can make sharp knives and we can make well geometry knives, things that won't crush your food, as well as things that can get really razor sharp, because A lot of my customers are professional chefs, not just executive chefs, but also line cooks and sous chefs and chef de cuisines. And they know it when they see that, that's their life 12, sometimes 14 hours a day. Cutting grapes, but cutting garlic, cutting red pepper, cutting bell pepper, cutting chiffonading basil and cutting cilantro and cutting citrus fruit and stuff like that. When they see that, that's what they live. It's impressive to the rest of us too to see a beautiful thin cut on a tomato as well. Those are fun to do.
Yeah,
people kind of like those.
Yeah, like I said, they're super proud. I've never seen anything like that. I was like, geez, that's crazy. So what made you interested in the Japanese art of knife making versus any other style of knives?
Well, I do all styles at the request of my customers. The Japanese style that I like, that I gravitate toward, is because it's hard to explain. When I look at a knife in profile and I see it, I see the functionality of it. I see the amount of belly. Just to give you a little difference, a German knife will have almost a flat spine, where a lot of big belly comes up to the spine, so your point is kind of high off the cutting board. A French knife will move the point down kind of at a line in between the spine and the cutting edge. So you'll have less belly, but it'll be more torpedo shaped. Okay? And a Japanese knife will move the point of the knife down even closer to the cutting board, have belly, but much less belly, more flatter, okay, but have plenty of belly to rock with on the cutting board if you want to do rock chopping and stuff like that. And what it does is, so it has sort of a downward, sort of porpoise-like head on the front of it. I make a lot of ones that are flat on the front that are called kiritsuki tips, because that's a different style of knife. Japanese knife. Japanese have 200 different knives, each of which is designed for a single cutting purpose. I mean, they have a knife that is designed to make a one longitudinal cut in a river eel. That's it. That's all it is. You hammer an eel spike through the head of the eel, you hold the tail, and you make this one longitudinal cut through the river eel with this it's called an unagasaki.
And you put it away.
Well, it depends on how many river eels you're filleting. But yeah, that's what it's for. You don't use that to cut your vegetable. You don't use it to chop your scallions or stuff like that. Yeah. You pick up something else to do that. You pick up your nikiri to do that. If you want to do butchery, you pick up your hankotsu or your hanasuke. This is a hanasuke that I made for Michael Voltaggio here. So you can see that knife is shorter blade. It's stouter. Yes. Okay. It's got that point to it, that kind of clip point on it. That's designed to get into or between the. It's stouter to cut through bone and to get in between joints and stuff like that. Okay. But that's a bony knife for the Japanese. So there's a hanatsuke, which is like that, and then there's a hankotsu, which is a different type of knife, which looks more kind of even across it. So the knife you're looking at is triple dyed California Buckeye burl with a purple marbled stone in the middle, and the front of it is a purple resin with embedded aluminum shavings. So it looks really kind of, it sparkles in the light.
Yeah, it's beautiful, man. Beautiful, beautiful knife.
So it's, that's a purpose-driven knife. Yes. I wouldn't be cutting a whole bunch of vegetables. I wouldn't be going through a whole bunch of onions or celery with that. That's one of the what do you call it? It's one of the specific knives that the Japanese have come with. So because of that, because they have such purpose-driven knives, I look at them and I say, I know what that's for. I know what they're trying to achieve with that profile of the blade. And it just appeals to me aesthetically. Yes. And I'll look at it, and sometimes after I'm done a knife, I'll look at it and stare at it. And I've done this many times before. I stare at it and I say, my customer's been waiting for this. I want to keep this one. How fast can I make them another one just like this so I can keep this one? Okay. So,
well, in contrast, do the French and German style knives are made to do the chopping and the deboning and the eel cut? I mean, are they like a one blade does all? To an extent, right?
They have less variety of blades. Okay. They have more general. There's the chef knife, the boning, the utility, the bread, the paring knife. Those are most of the encompassed 99% of the European style knives.
Those are some standard kitchen knives that we all know.
Correct.
Right? Yes.
Okay. And they'll do everything with them. So the Japanese are much more precise. They're much more purpose driven in those sorts of. It's got to be a feng shui thing. I have no clue why, but they but they dissect down each hand movement in the kitchen to then optimize a blade for it. Like there's a slicer that they use, a Yanagaba, that's for slicing sushi, but then there's another slicer that's better that they use. It's a slicer, but it's used for slicing octopus. Okay, and then there's a slicer that's used for slicing rolls versus sashimi and stuff like that. It's totally different, and they all have different names. They all have different things. The function is slightly different in the hand of the chef, of a master chef, so he can actually notice his difference as he's handling it. But that's how they've optimized it. If a French chef was gonna make a sushi roll, they'd pick up their sabatier and they would cut their sushi roll.
Yes.
Okay. They would take their fillet knife. If they're going to fillet a fish, and they take their chef's knife or their fillet knife and fillet the fish. Whereas the Japanese, is it a big heavy bone fish? Shall I use a deba? Shall I use a yodeba? Shall I use a wadeba? Shall I use a hankotsu to cut my fish, or shall I use my gyoto, or shall I use my katsuo? I'm making some katsuos. They're different. A katsuo is a knife for filleting a certain freshwater fish from a certain lake in northern Japan. But it's a cool knife.
Yeah,
I'm gonna make a couple of those. They have a hankotsu for different type of boning. Then there's the hanasuge, which is a poultry boning knife, and then they have a budakiri, which is for butchering pigs. Okay, so very interesting. It's very interesting. So I see what the function is, and it really kind of appeals to me. And honestly, I like because the belly on the gyoto is flatter. It still has belly, but it's lower to the cutting board. It has less deflection than the French or the German knives. When I rock up on the blade, before I come down to do a chop, I'm rocking up on the point. So my blade from the point to the heel is off the cutting board. So my 210 millimeter knife has 210 millimeters of cutting edge ready to cut with. My German knife, which has a big belly, when I rock up, it's rotating at a point 2, maybe 3 centimeters back from the point of the blade. So now my 8-inch German knife, which would be, let's say it's 210 millimeters, is now effectively a 180 millimeter cutting knife. Okay. Yep. Because that's where I pivoted up, because I'm not going to pivot my elbow up over to the level of my ear to get it up on the point of my German. Point. Exactly. Yeah. So aesthetically and functionally, Japanese cutlery is, I think, much more functional than other styles. I do other styles. I do plenty of French, and then some people who want German knives want a big high point on it. That's what they like. There's nothing wrong with that. It's how the chef is used to doing it, how he and his ergonomics. Some shorter chefs with shorter arms and shorter hands and wrists and stuff like that, they want to have a very low belly. Some taller chefs with have high shoulders and longer arms, they can get really close to the point on a German knife. Yes. That's, again, what I do is custom blades for them. I'll ask people, how big's your hand? Or how big's your wife's hand if you're going to buy it for your wife? How tall are you? Where are you standing? Do you have a low cutting surface? Do you have a high cutting surface? So I can optimize the ergonomics. Do you want a wider heel and a narrower point so that the actual cutting edge comes up at an angle? Or do you want a low flat angle? Yeah. Like my folks, my chefs who are now with Jose Andres, they wanted a flatter, lower pointed cutting angle on theirs. So that's what I made for him. Instead of having the point come up 2 centimeters off the cutting surface, it came up 1 to 1.5 centimeters because he wanted a smaller knife because he's not as tall as I am. Whereas some of them want higher, more gracile points to them because their shoulders come up higher.
Yeah,
that sort of thing. So that's a custom knife.
How often do you get people come in and you ask those questions where you're height of your cutting surface, and they say, "Well, I don't know, I have no idea." Like, they never
think of it. I ask
exactly.
I ask it all the time
because you're saying all these questions that you're asking. And if you were to ask me, if I were to call you up and say, "Hey, I'm looking for a blade this and I like this style versus that style or whatever," and you started asking those questions, I'd look at you kind of dumbfounded, like, "Well, yeah, sure, whatever you think."
Well, you saw my kitchen. My cutting board is 20 inches deep. Okay, so but some people don't have a full island where they can work on. Some people live in have a cutting area that's on a counter that's much more narrow. Do I want to give them a 10-inch blade that they're going to be banging against the wall off of it, or they're going to be falling off or whatever, or their hand's going to be off the cutting board or whatever? So I asked them, where do you cut? What size thing do you cut on? What have you been using? What don't you like about it? So if they're working in a more cramped area, 210, 220 millimeter, which is 8 1/4 to 8 1/2 inches.
Yes.
No problem. But if they're working in a freestanding cutting area, you want a little bit more oomph to it?
Yeah.
Oh, heck, 250 millimeter, 10 inches, perfect for you. You've got the room for it.
Yeah.
Because if you're not comfortable using it and you pay, $750 for a custom-made knife and you're jamming the point into you have to move everything out of the way to make room just to cut your food and stuff like that, you're going to say, today I just want to be able to cut. Let me go back to my old Chicago cutlery, 8-inch chef's knife.
Yeah.
And let me put this expensive handmade knife away because it's the same thing with fountain pens too.
Yeah.
If it doesn't write well, the line isn't what you like, you just put it down and you've just wasted $400 on a nice fountain pen. I don't want you to do that. I want you to get the knife for where you're going to, do I know whether you're going to move into a big, 4,000 square foot house with a big, huge, decor kitchen with a central cutting on it? I never know that. You just buy another knife for me. Yeah, that's all. But I ask people these things.
Yeah.
People want to buy stuff for their family, like Andy Vincent. When he came by, Andy is the second largest human being that I've ever personally met. Andrew is huge.
Yes.
He's shaped opposite me. I'm more pear-shaped. He's more wedge-shaped.
Yeah.
I mean, he's all shoulder and he's got a small waist and he's got, I hope he's listening, he's got these monster calves. The largest human being I ever met he's a friend of mine, is the investigator for the Attorney General's office.
Okay.
He was the chief ranger here for many years in Texas. And I would have to I would get a neck ache staring up at him, which is what you want for a Texas Ranger. But I asked him. Well, he was buying this knife as a gift for his brother.
Yes.
Who was a world Highland Games champion who's now training again for it. I said, tell me about his hand. What does it look like? Is he kind of some sort of short, stocky little runt, or is he a big, meaty? Is he the Man Mountain from
Game of Thrones?
Stuff like that. He said, well, he's got a kind of big hand and stuff like that. And I say, okay, well, how about what type of handle is he? Oh, he needs a bigger handle to be comfortable. So that's what I made for him. I made a bigger handle for. So I ask these ergonomic questions. Okay, I had a professor at the Rice Business School. He wanted to buy a knife for his wife, who's a physician. And I've met her before. She's about this big. She's maybe 5'1".
Yes.
Maybe 5'2" on heels. And he said, I want you to make a knife for my wife. And I said, okay, no problem. I'll do that. And she has small hands. Perfect hands for a proctologist. Small fingers. Okay. Anyway, I think she's a pediatrician, actually. But so I made a more gracile, thinner handled blade thinner handle for her, and I made the blade height lower for her. So I don't need to give her a big, huge, 2.5 inch wide blade because and I asked him about his countertops that she's cooking on normal sized, I shouldn't say normal size. She's sticking on standard sized, construction countertops that people have in their kitchens. But she's raising her arm up a little bit more because she's so short.
Yes.
So I gave her a more narrow blade with a more gracile handle for her, which is more comfortable for her.
Yeah.
What does that take It takes exactly 2 freaking seconds for me to look at her and say, oh, she's got smaller hands, so she can't have a big meaty handle, and she's kind of short, so I have to now make a narrower knife for her so she can enjoy it.
Makes a lot of sense.
It takes... For me, as a forensic pathologist, that's what I do every day. This past week, I did it 5 times on 5 different bodies. I look at bodies. I see what your ergonomics are, how tall you are, how big your hands are, spade-like hands, small hands, big feet, long legs, whatever. And I can see your ergonomics.
That's that algorithmic thinking that you were speaking about earlier.
Exactly correct. How is your body going to translate into how you use this tool? Those are the ergonomics. I'll give you a funny story. When I was in medical school, we were rounding with a guest plastic surgeon from Great Britain. He was on the plastic surgery service. He came in to give grand rounds and lectures, stuff like that. And so we're the medical students and the residents, and he's going around with us to see the floor patients and stuff like that as we're seeing them pre-op and post-op. And so we see this one guy who's got, and plastic surgeons do a lot of hand reconstruction for arthritis, for fractures or whatever. So this patient was worked in an automobile body shop, and he didn't, for whatever stupid reason, he liked pounding on the panels of the thing to get them smooth and whatever with his hand. With the heel of his hand.
Yeah.
Well, you can't do that forever without getting arthritis, microfractures, and stuff like that. It got to the point where he had so much pain, he had to have a fusion. They had basically take 2K wires and go straight across his wrist to fuse his hand so it wouldn't move at all, so he'd have no more pain. So this British surgeon, we're talking about this guy's upcoming surgery, and he's pimping us. Pimping is the medical term for asking us lots of questions to see the limits of our medical knowledge, both the medical students and the residents, stuff like that. He says, if you're going to, he said in his British accent, he said, if you're going to fuse this man's hand, you remember, why do you have to fuse it flexed like this? And we're all sitting there thinking, well, so he can do this, whatever, but so he can grab stuff and pick up stuff, because this is the position of function, which is a little bit extended. Okay, that's the most comfortable neutral position. It's like the position when you're shooting a gun.
Yeah. Okay.
You're not going to shoot a gun with your wrist flexed like that.
Correct.
But if you're going to fuse someone's wrist perfectly for the rest of their lives so that they can use it, it's got to be a little flexed. And we're all sitting there coming up with these reasons. And he says, no. That's not why you fix their wrist flexed. It's because how else is he going to wipe his ass? And we're all looking at it. We're realizing you're exactly right.
Yeah. That's the exact.
So the whole point is that you look at the body, you look at the function it's going to have to do, you look at the knife that I'm going to make for you. How am I going to meld your body habitus? Okay, your short habitus, your short arms, your tall habitus, your medium thing, your big. Some people with short bodies and short arms have big spade-like hands. Some people who are very tall have long gracile fingers and stuff like that curve around the whole hand. So if you make it too narrow for them, the handle too narrow, they end up gripping their fingernails into their palm.
Yeah.
That's annoying. Okay. You don't want it to be annoying. You want it to be comfortable for them. So again, I take that from forensics and looking at body habituses and biomechanics and stuff like that, and turning it into a comfortable knife for people.
Yeah.
I'll give you another incident. I made this knife here. This is sharp, so don't cut yourself. This is about a 10-inch knife. It's got an incredible curvature to the blade.
Yes.
It's what we call a scimitar. Okay. And
it's much different than any other blade I've seen that you've had so far.
This blade comes from a design from Iberico ham.
Okay.
So this blade, a guy comes from me, and the first true Iberico ham farm in the United States is out here in Sealy.
Okay.
Where they're actually bringing in the pigs from Spain. They're breeding them out there. They are feeding them acorns. And they're butchering them out there, and they're providing the meat locally here. So they're in like the fifth year of production. But the butchers that are teaching the local people to do the butchery are Spanish butchers. from Spain on Spanish pigs, eating a Spanish pig diet, producing a Spanish quality Iberico ham product for the restaurants. So this butcher that they're training out there comes to me, and he is. The knives that they're bringing in are Spanish knives. They are the worst pieces of crap that I've ever seen. I could take the edge of those Spanish-made knives and I could flick off the edge and serrate the edge of their knife with my fingernail. They're such low-quality steel.
Wow.
And the handles are an injection-molded plastic, which is glassy smooth. So, but this exaggerated curvature is because they butcher their hogs not like we do. They don't come up with a Boston butt. They don't come up with a short rib. They don't come up with a St. Louis rib and stuff like that. They butcher Iberico ham anatomically by muscle group.
Okay.
And come up with their different types of loins, their short loins, their leg loins, and all that sort of stuff. They do it by muscle group. They actually get in between the fascial planes, in between the muscles and stuff like that. Much more precision. And to do that, it's just not like hacking at it with a knife. And so they teach them a very specific way to like move their arm and shoulder with the angle of the blade, with the curvature of the blade to get the cut that they want. Mm-hmm. So this poor guy comes in and he's saying, these knives don't stay. I saw the article about you in the newspaper. These knives just won't stay sharp. Of course not, because they're crap. If they charge more than $9.95 for these knives, then they're overpaying for them. They're made of crap. I can't keep them straight, and I can't hold it tight enough to keep it from spinning. Well, why don't you just hold it? Why don't you just choke up on it? Put your thumb and your index finger on the side of the blade. And they said, they won't let us hold the knife like that because that's not how they do it in Spain. We have to hold it like a bear club. So you can imagine holding this cylindrical thing that's wet with blood and other bodily fluids from a butchered pig and stuff like that. It turns glassy smooth. So I said, wait a minute, give me your hand. So I take his right hand, I start tapping on his wrist and stuff like that, and I realize, he's got tingling. He's developing carpal tunnel from holding these knives, having to squeeze them in a death grip.
Yeah.
Because they're 4 inches high. So you've got a 4-inch high lever arm spinning the knife in your hand. Okay. But he has to have this exaggerated curvature to do this sort of elbow, wrist, shoulder movement. I said, how about this? Ergonomically, I'll improve it for you. I'll make it 2 inches tall, so you have less of a lever arm on the wide blade, but I'll keep the exact same edge curvature. So this is the exact same edge as their $5 knife, okay? But it's made out of much better steel, so it stays sharper. But then I shortened it, so it's only 2 inches wide, and then I gave him this Coke bottle. So put that in your hand.
Yeah.
I gave him this Coke bottle handle.
Yeah, that's not going to move.
That's like a Bowie knife. It fills out your palm.
Yes.
So your hand touches it on all surfaces to create better friction. Mm-hmm. So it's less likely to spin.
Yes.
But it's got the same exact edge to it. So you can do the same exact exaggerated arm movement to the butcher shop. Mm-hmm. So he took that to his boss, one of the chief things, and the boss said, no, it's not Spanish. You're not going to use it. So anyway, he came suffering with carpal tunnel. Yeah. And he's going to have carpal tunnel. He's going to have a carpal release at some point because they're forcing him to have a repetitive motion injury to do those sorts of things so they can be authentico. So, but then again, I developed this beautiful knife. Now this one, Chef Aaron Malakian from Harlem Road Barbecue, he saw this. He wants to use this because this is a knife that he trained with in Europe. Again, Iberico, European stuff. So the Europeans use a scimitar butcher knife like this. So this one is probably going to go to him, if not others. So this is a great butcher knife. But that's me looking at this poor bastard's way that he's using a knife, what he's suffering by using the knives he's doing, and me coming up with a better ergonomic solution for him that will relieve his injury and be more comfortable for him. Just like you could go buy the Oxo stuff over at Bed Bath & Beyond. You know, those are for people with bad grips and arthritis and stuff like that. They're all bigger, tacky, rubbery handles and stuff like that. That's what it's for.
Yeah.
Because even though you have arthritis, you still want to cook.
Yes.
So anyway.
So that was another question I was going to. Do you have a lot of butchers coming to you asking for specific type of blades? I know that's a perfect example right there, but and then also barbecue as well. I mean,
well, yeah. Right now barbecue is going through this incredible renaissance.
Yes.
So with Franklin,
which I love, by the way.
I'm glad you do because I love it too. Once I can't say once this happened. He's the product of this whole movement and the epitome of it, which is Aaron Franklin.
Yes.
Doing Franklin Barbecue, doing his stuff. He is the epitome of the craft barbecue house.
Yes.
Okay. Barbecue restaurant. It's been going on. Texas barbecue has been going on for it come from chuck wagons.
Yes.
Okay. Century plus, but it's become now it's recognized as a true American
art form.
Yes. Culinary art form. Has won James Beard Awards. There's festivals just for it and all that sort of stuff. So now these guys now realize. Now they're having custom barbecues made out of these big, huge gas tanks, 55-gallon drums, whatever. You can have these purpose-driven smokers, grills, everything like that, because they want to turn out better product with better smoking, better temperature control, and whatever. But they're all still now they're starting to realize we're all still using the same $24.95 Dexter Russell NSF white plastic handle knife to cut these things. Why is that? Well, because we can throw it away. We can get a new one if it gets dull.
Yeah. Because
of these long serrated knives and stuff like that. And it's hard to sharpen a serrated knife. Let's get rid of this shit. When it gets dull and I can't cook with it, toss it away. It's only $24. And the next knife will last me 3 or 4 months. No big deal. I'm selling Fabulous Barbecue at, $75, $80, $90 a pound. I could buy a knife every, I could buy 4 knives a year on that. So I got a call from Eric Aldis when he was running Midtown Barbecue, and it's funny. I got this call when I was at the Tandy Leather store in the middle of the store. He said, Stephen, I want to get a couple of barbecue knives. I said, okay. What do you want them for? He said, I want them for brisket, slicing brisket. And I said, okay. How long do they need to be? And he said, well, you tell me. You're the knife maker. How long do you think they need to be? And I said, a brisket is roughly about the same size and thickness as a human liver, okay? So I love my 14-inch long Oregon slicing knives that I make for autopsy. So how about a 14-inch slicer for your brisket? I'm having this conversation in the middle of Tandy Leather Company, and people around me are looking at me. It's like slicing human livers.
We need to get out of this place.
There's something that I need to get away with. This guy is going to go postal on us or something like that. So that's when I developed my brisket knife, which is I'm gonna stand up here.
All right, so you got your brisket knives there.
Well, so I designed the brisket knife, and I figured, what's going to make, it looks like everyone thinking we're going to use what Aaron Franklin uses. Okay, we're going to get the Dexter Russell $24.95 serrated knife. Okay, and that's what everybody uses. So sorry, I can't say that everybody uses it, but that's what's most frequently, because you get it at the restaurant supply stores where you buy your hotel pans and your hotel trays and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So we'll get the knives there. So I said, okay. The steels on those knives, horrible steels, made in China, 420 steel, okay, which is horrible edge holding. It's tough steel, meaning if you drop it, it's not going to break.
Yes,
but it doesn't hold an edge. But it's disposable because it's $24.95. So who cares? Okay, so I'm going to make it out of good steel. So I designed a knife, 14 inches long. Well, how's it going to be custom looking? You know what? I'm going to make it a Tanto blade. So this is my standard one. This is going to be a Joey Victorians over Victorians barbecue. But the same one I made for Eric Aldis as well. So that's 14 inches of cutting power with a big Tanto front to it. Uh-huh. And the Tanto, when I make it, is actually sharpened. So that's basically a short sword. Okay, yes. You can run it straight through somebody. You can run it. It'll go from one side to the other. But it's a cool blade. Why? Because it doesn't. It's not serrated. It's smooth, but it's made out of high quality cutlery steel. Actually, cutlery and combat steel, which goes through the bark of the densest bark on a brisket perfectly, and it gives you again, I designed this on my organ cutting knife. Now, if your audience doesn't understand this, pathologists don't want to saw on their organs when they cut them, just in case there's something cool in there, like a bullet pathway or a tumor or some developmental abnormality that you want to take a picture of, so you can document it for the case file, or if it's going to be published in a medical journal, something like that. You want to make one beautiful long draw cut through it, razor blade thin, so there's not this knife chatter sawing back and forth. For competition barbecue folks, I don't know if you've seen those guys. Yes. They have to have like 8 perfect slices of perfectly even thickness that are perfectly smooth and aesthetically beautiful, laid on a bed of lettuce or coleslaw or whatever the heck they do with it. I don't think it's coleslaw, but they have to make it presentable in the tray to when they bring it over to the judge's stand. So every slice has to be perfect. So why do you want to have a knife that's a serrated knife that you're going to end up sawing back and forth on it? Tearing the bark, tearing the meat. You want to have a nice, just like I want to have a beautiful cut on my livers to photograph for a medical journal, or my hearts or my kidneys or something like that. I want to be able to put the back of the blade here on the brisket, on the meat, push down a little bit, and then draw the blade straight through in one long draw cut. Okay? Because what you do is you take it and you put the meat on the back here, and then you put the point on the cutting board. So you draw this everything straight through. So the point of your knife never comes off the cutting board as your knife moves through the tissue. You're not going to get that with a serrated knife. Yes. So that's why I designed this. And just to make it kind of cool, I put a tanto point on it, which is really kind of cool. So now this, and so you hold the two together. This is the same blade, same length, but it's got this much more narrow blunted end to it. So this is what my autopsy knife looks like. Okay. But why this blunted end? What is that? I mean, I could cut a liver with a tanto point as well. No, this blunted end here, this narrow round blunted end, is because when I open up the heart, when I open up hearts, what I want to do is I make a cut through the apex of the heart, and expose the right and left ventricles, and then I take the round point and I stick it back up through the mitral valve. So it's got to go through a narrow opening. Okay. So it's got this round end, so it doesn't poke through the heart. It follows the valve. Then it goes up through the pulmonary valve, then out the aortic valve, and then out the tricuspid valve. So that's what this is. And number 2 is when we have to open up the bowel. You know, like when you buy chitlins, that when you get those hog bowels, they're not intact. They've been split open. Most of the poo has been washed out of them. Most of the poo, okay, stuff like that. But when we're examining intestines, I've got to cut them open to see if there's a tumor, if there's necrosis, if there's a torsion or anything like that. Maybe I'm looking for a bullet or something like that. I got stuck in the bowel or whatever to find it. Doing that with a scissor, you're going to poke 25 different holes in the bowel. But what I do is I can take the bowel and run it up on the blade here on the round point. Then I can pull the bowel up onto the blade as it comes over this curvature, as the blade gets wider, and this is now a razor's edge. The intestines just fillets open the entire way. So I can do my job faster, get a more beautiful exposure to the bowel and see it. And if there's something photogenic on it, yes, I can take a better picture. So this is my autopsy knife, 14 inches, and this is the brisket knife. So again, you can see very similar. Yeah, they're both designed for they're both designed for function as well as for ergonomics. Yeah. Okay. And that's what I think is cool about making knives. It's like, what am I trying to achieve with this? Yeah. You know, most knives that made are chef's knives. That's no problem. But I can do specialty knives as well. So that's a lot of fun. So this is now a hot barbecue knife, this slicer. I mean, I've got bunches of orders for these from bunches of barbecue guys for it because they realize, wait a minute, that's what I've been looking for. Yes. No one's been making it, but that's what I've been looking for. Something this long, this wide, where I can make these types of cuts because I want my barbecue to look a certain way, and this is the knife that's going to do it.
Well, the other thing about cutting, so I've done barbecue, I've done competition barbecue. We have one coming up at Galveston County Fair the next couple of weekends. We got seafood cook-off, and then we have a barbecue cook-off the following week. So I participate on that. The problem you have when you're trying to cut through that bark of a brisket or whatever the case, and if you don't have a good knife, you're pressing down and you're losing moisture out of the meat, right? You're losing juice. You can see it. You see everybody, when they want to show an impressive video of how good their barbecue is, they'll press down on the meat and the juices flow out. Well, when you're trying to turn in for a competition, you don't want to lose those juices. So when you don't have a good knife and you're trying to cut and you're trying to press and you're sawing on your meat and your bark's ripping off and you're having to press down and lose your meat, all that matters in high competition barbecue, which is in Texas is a huge deal, right?
That's exactly correct.
Yeah.
So that's the whole point of this. You want to cut effortlessly.
Yes.
Long, straight, non-serrated blade, because you don't have to push down to get the serrations in the meat to cut with. You want to draw it out. Of course, it requires that you, the pit master, sharpen your freaking knife.
Yes.
But it also requires that you have a long enough knife to make a perfect draw cut through it.
Yes.
Not sawing back and forth because guess what? There have been plenty of barbecue competitions that have been lost not on taste but on aesthetics.
Correct.
Correct. That's his.
So the problem with, you said earlier, everybody wants to do what Aaron Franklin's doing. The problem with that is he doesn't really do competition barbecue. So if you're a competitive barbecue guy and you're turning in these pretty boxes and all that like you're trying to do, using the knife that Aaron Franklin does to turn out 600 pounds of brisket a day is not the correct philosophy you should be having. You should and the best knife I ever seen, I did a cook-off a couple of years ago, and one of the guys on the team brought, and it was very similar to that. It had a longer base on it, but went down to a point, and I just had the regular old serrated knife like we always use, and I'm sawing and hacking or whatever, and he brought that knife, and he had it sharp, and it was a world of difference. I was like, where'd you get that knife at? He's like, and he wanted to kind of keep it a secret, I guess. I don't know. But it makes a difference. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And,
absolutely.
And so that's kind of why the butcher side of things and that rounded edge, like you were saying, is making me think when you have a deer hanging up by its hind legs and you're running down its belly to get the skin away, they have a couple tools for that you can go on the back side of it, but normally you put your two fingers down there, you put your knife, and you kind of run it all the way down. The problem with that is sometimes you have that pointed edge and you're poking stomachs and you're poking, intestines and bladders and all that you don't want to do.
Do
right?
the same thing in an autopsy.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So that rounded edge would be a very good idea to skin a deer to where you don't have that point. You don't have that worry where you can just take it and run it down.
Right. You don't need a point to do it because you basically put you start with the sharpened edge of the blade on the skin, and then if it's sharp, the minute you move the blade a centimeter or two, it's already bitten into the skin.
Yes.
And has gone through the skin. So all you now do is continuing through your cut through the skin. I've done that with my large knives, making my first Y incisions on autopsies. I know exactly what you're talking about. Now, I don't really have to worry about stool or urine contamination because I'm not looking to create deli cuts when I do autopsies.
Obviously, yes.
No, we're just looking to do the anatomic diagnoses. You're looking to preserve the skeletal muscle for consumption.
Yes.
We don't consume the skeletal muscle from a forensic autopsy. So that type of contamination we don't have to really worry about. But yes, you're exactly right. So you see the need for it. Now this knife, I just want to say, it's great for competition, but again, for regular daily usage, for cutting, for your customers and shit like that, this is perfect for them. They love this. Aaron Malakian loves his. Joey Victorian is using my demo knife right now, and he's loving it. It's gonna be at the Houston Barbecue Festival on the 9th, so you can go see them in action up in Humble. So go look for Chef Aaron and Joey Victorian. You'll see him there. But the other thing is that not just with the brisket knives for the barbecue guys, it's also when I show fillet knives, and I make them for fish. Yeah. All of a sudden, I get calls from the barbecue guys, and I've gotten multiple barbecue guys and women too, Cattle Mama, if you're listening, yours is coming. Don't worry about it. She was a chef with, I think, HEB or Texas Foodways, something like that. But now she does competition barbecue. It's like they use fillet knives to do their trim. Okay, to trim their briskets, to get the silver flesh off and all that sort of stuff.
I do too. I do the same thing.
Well, guess what? I now have I now have not just, butchers and restaurateurs that want fillet knives, but I now have barbecue guys that want a beautiful, high quality, high wear resistant. So I don't have to sit there and stroke it on their freaking chef steel all the time. I want to be able to trim 10 briskets without having to resharpen my knife.
That'd be amazing.
And that's what I'm making for them out of, high wear resistant and high alloyed steels. So my my fillet knives are now a bunch going to barbecue guys.
Yes.
And then I made a bread knife for breadman company that's going to be opening up here soon, whose wife is Rule It in the Morning. Okay. For those of you who listen, he's starting his own bakery, but he has one of my bread knives. And when I showed that, all of a sudden, the barbecue guys went, "That's what I cut my barbecue with. I want a knife like that." So now I'm making a bunch of bread knives, serrated knives for the barbecue guys because they want something different than your Dexter Russell $24.99 knife, but they want serrations. No problem. That's exactly right. The Dexter Russell.
This is what I've been seeing is these wide-handled rounded tips, right? They're the rounded, the blunt front end, like you're talking about. What is it about the rounded to cut brisket with? Why is that a good thing?
Nothing, because the roundedness is not sharp.
Correct.
It's just round to be safe because it's such a long knife. They don't want you stabbing yourself, stabbing or something like that, dropping it on your foot because your hands are kind of greasy and oily from the fats in the brisket. That's designed only to have a sharp, a serrated edge, not designed to have a point to it. Okay.
How does that make you? What does that make you think? So we're looking at a Damascus blade brisket knife, is what it's saying.
Well, that's a chef's knife, and it's $115, and it's Damascus. And I'm going to tell you this right now: that's made from steel from Pakistan.
Okay,
made from car parts. Okay.
Okay.
And it's made, and they'll say because they know that here in the United States, this is what most Damascus makers use. They'll say it's 15 N20 and 1095 steels banged together and twisted and folded to make a Damascus blade. That's made from mystery steel, from car parts, old vehicles, old Russian tanks in Pakistan and Afghanistan and stuff like that. Made and hardened. It's not hardened. It's hard. And I hate to say it's made by oftentimes it's made by child slave labor in Pakistan.
Wow.
And then they come up with that. I get offers from Pakistani suppliers that want to sell me blade blanks and stuff like that. So if you see a Damascus knife for sale for $115 or $100 or $45, it's mystery steel made in Pakistan out of God knows what sort of reclaimed garbage out of vehicles. Which, if we watch Forged in Fire, we see them doing the same types of things, but on the American vehicles, the bladesmiths kind of know where the spring steel is made of and where the support structures are made of and what's made of what and stuff like that. The stuff that comes from Pakistan, mystery steel, don't waste your money on it. Just don't waste your money. It looks nice. It looks fancy. You're going to be very unhappy. I've got a couple of those blades. I show them to people that want to understand more about it. It's don't be gullible for it.
Yeah. So that's the thing.
But what he's showing is he's showing a longer blade.
Yes. Okay. That's the thing. The reason why I wanted to have a knife maker on, have somebody who's expert in all this stuff, is I am ignorant to all of the steels and what makes a quality knife versus what you can buy at Sam's Club in a 12-pack knife set, So,
well, the stuff at Sam's Club is made in China. It's Dexter Russell or stuff like that, or Tramontina or whatever. They're made in China. They're made out of 420 steel blade, 420 steel, which is designed to be stain resistant and not rust, and it's designed to not break when you drop it. Okay, and if you bang it on something, it's a good thing to use if you want to open your pickle jar up. You bang it on the lid of your pickle jar, and it's designed to be inexpensive because they use that steel that costs 30 cents a pound.
Quantity, not quality.
So they turn out, and this is the other thing I want to show you. They turn out X number of thousands of these of blades here. So this was I got on Alibaba recently.
Okay.
They have an app now, so you can actually buy from AliExpress and stuff like that. Because I was looking for G10 material for my handles and stuff, for my handle liners and stuff like that.
I imagine that'd be a good place, good source to look.
Well, that's where it's made. It's made in China and shipped over to the United States. So I was like, I'll just buy it from the suppliers. So I'm going through the Alibaba and I'm looking here, and they sell in larger quantities. You have to buy like 100, 500, 10,000, stuff like that.
Yes.
So here, this is I found a blade maker. So what is that? You can enlarge that to see it. It's the Chinese selling a quote VG10 unquote chef's knife, 8 inches or 8.25 inches or 8.5 inches long.
8 inches.
8 inches long. VG10 steel with them. I think does it have Damascus on it?
Damascus, 67 layers.
67 layers of a Damascus pattern on both sides of it with VG10. That's in air quotes. VG10 air quotes steel. And what is the price of that knife?
$18 to $24 a piece.
$18 to $24 a piece when you buy them at a minimum quantity of what, 500, I think?
150 piece minimum.
150 piece minimum. Okay, so this is what the Chinese are turning out. Mm-hmm. That's a high quality Chinese knife. Okay, $18 for 150 of them minimum. Okay, so that's what you're getting, and what that turns into, and me as a knife maker, I also get to do a lot of sharpening, and people bring their knives to me to sharpen. This is what the quality of the shuns are as well, and a lot of chefs, because they're line cooks and they can't afford a $1,000 knife, they'll get on eBay and they'll buy a Yaxel or a Dalstrong or any of these other knives like that, and this is what you're looking at. Here it is, right on Alibaba. Okay, $18, but they'll sell it to you for $100 per blade.
Yeah.
Okay, they're poorly hardened. They're maybe not tempered. They're hardened. They can be over hardened. They can be hardened up to a Rockwell of 65, 66, 67.
Over hardened makes the blade brittle.
Makes it blade brittle. So all of a sudden, after using it for a month or two, you now have a hacksaw blade in your hand rather than a smooth handle chef's knife. I can't tell you the numbers of people that come here with their shun knives to me to take out their chips, their dings, and all that sort of stuff, and I have to regrind them, narrow the blade, rethin the blade, so it's not just a big meaty edge now that's just shorter. I have to actually rethin the blade for them because it was a gift or it was their first knife or whatever. So you get this poor quality over-hardened knife, which looks nice. I mean, that's a nice looking knife.
Yes.
It's all shiny. It's got a black pocket wood handle and stuff like that on. But it's turned out at the... That's just one gun. I mean, there are people... I'm sorry. Let me. There's one other thing here on his advertisement here. He has what does it say as the supply ability if you wanted to order it? What is right underneath there?
Supply ability. That is 10,000 pieces per day.
He can turn out 10,000 of those knives per day to meet your order.
That's
what
unreal.
Quality do you think you're getting if you order 10,000 of these knives to be delivered next week?
Yeah.
Okay? So you can just imagine it.
Well, that's the problem, right? Is that it is a good-looking knife.
It is a good-looking knife
to the layman, right? So it's someone just looking at this one's $100 and this one's $800. I don't really see the difference.
What is it? It's been used as high quality steel with high quality known alloying elements of a certain concentrations, 1.2% vanadium, 3% tungsten, 10% vanadium, 2% tungsten, blah, blah, blah. You know all that. Therefore, the metallurgist who hardens it knows exactly, do I hold it at 1450 for 20 minutes and then ramp up to 2150 and hold it there for 15 minutes? And then do I do an air quench between aluminum plates, or do I do how many rounds of sub-zero tempering do I have to do? I bring it back down to room temperature, then I sub-zero temperature. Do I do it with liquid nitrogen, or do I do it with dry ice and acetone bath? Then do I temper back at 500 degrees Fahrenheit or 450 or 600, and then do I do another sub-zero quench on it? Yeah. Because you want to convert your crystalline structures to the you want to convert it from I think austenite to martensite, or I'm backwards, martensite to austenite, I forget which, but you want to convert all that stuff, and that takes multiple rounds of cycling that a metallurgist is expert at. These crappy knives are turned out 10,000 a day to turn out a finished knife. How much do you think the metallurgist is going to do other than get it hard enough so it'll hold an edge, but never retain that edge.
Yeah.
Now, I will say this, being in the custom knife making world, I speak to a lot of custom knife makers, and there are a lot of really good custom knife makers who have their knives, who've gotten big enough and production-wise enough that they need to have their knives made in China. China, there are knife making houses that will make as high quality a knife as a handmade knife maker here in the United States. And guess what? They're made by hand in China. And a handmade knife maker here in the United States, making one at a time, selling his knives for $2,000. These are folding knives and tactical knives. $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 because it's high quality titanium, Damascus, whatever. The fit is perfect. The centering on the blade is perfect. And his price on it is $3,000 for that folding knife. Guess what? The Chinese knife makers out in China can turn out that same exact quality knife. And you know how much they're going to charge you for it? $3,000.
Really?
Correct. Because of all the hand labor.
Yeah.
So whether they're Chinese or American doesn't really matter. It's all the amount of labor. Their labor charges aren't really much different than a handmade knife maker here. Because if they're turning out one handmade knife there and they're turning out one handmade knife here, they're putting the same amount of labor into it. And they charge the same for it. But when you go to these places for Yaxel and Dowstrong and Cronco and other weird places that try to sell you the $1,200 knife set for the low cost of $129.95 with free shipping for 3 knives, you're not getting that. You're getting the people that can turn out 10,000 knives per day.
Yeah.
Not one knife every 24 days.
Yes.
Okay? Whether they're in China or the United States, no different if the quality is there. But these chef's knives, they're not turning them out with quality. 10,000 a day, what quality are you getting? Yeah. So if you want quality, if that's what's important to you, that's fine. If you want a disposable knife, that's fine. Buy 10 of those Chinese knives. Throw it away when they get dull. Don't bother sharpening them.
Well, the point at 10 knives at $100 a piece that you're throwing away, it's $1,000. You could have went and bought you a good knife. That's
exactly, which will last you multi generations.
Yes.
In your family, that sort of stuff. So that's my whole big deal about low quality knives versus high quality handmade knives. We spend the time to obsess over the quality of the steel and the hardening and the tempering and the edge holding and edge retention, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Whereas they want to give you 10,000 a day.
Gotcha.
That's the sort of thing.
So I'm going to read, this is an Instagram post you put out a couple days ago, and I'm going to have you walk me through what you're talking about because, like I said, I'm ignorant to all your terms and everything here. So this is the post, right?
Yeah.
And so we have a pair of super steel 210 millimeter, you can say that word?
Kiritsuki.
Tip
Gyoto.
Okay.
Gyoto is the Japanese term for chef's knife.
Okay.
All-purpose chef's knife.
So the Kiritsuki tip is that angled tip at the beginning.
The angled tip rather than the round dolphin-like tip, yes.
Okay, got you. 210 millimeters is roughly 9 inches?
8 1/4 inches.
8 1/4, okay. And so we got redwood burl and ebony in CPM 20 CV. Mm-hmm. What does that mean?
Well, the handle is redwood burl with ebony bolsters. Knife people know that ebony is kind of dark, so the darker portion of that handle, that the bolsters are the ebony portion. The redwood burl, if you enlarge it, you can see that there's... I
don't think it stays enlarged on Instagram.
But you can see there's all those little eyes and dots on it.
Uh-huh.
Those are the virus particles that the wood is reacting to, making the eyes that are in the ebony, and that's a burl.
Okay.
Yep, burls and woods are either viral related or cancer related. Burls are cancer, or healing, or virus.
Okay.
So this piece of redwood got infected with a tree virus, and the reaction was to make these beautiful little eyes to it. So you're not going to catch a tree virus if you use my knives because all the knives are stabilized and tree viruses don't jump into people's hands and stuff like that. But it makes the beautiful figures in the wood.
Okay.
The other one is dyed box elder burl with ebony bolsters. So they took the box elder burl and dyed it green and blue. Now the CPM 20 CV, people in the knife world know CPM stands for Crucible Particle Metallurgy.
Okay.
Crucible is the steel mill in upstate New York, near Niagara, New York. The Crucible Metal Works. Particle Metallurgy. When 440C was first made, it was basically steel. People have seen these pictures and videos of these steel mills with this huge crucible of steel hanging from the ceiling, being hauled over on a crane and then pouring the molten steel into a form, and that makes ingots. Okay. And that ingot is then either smashed out or rolled up into a long rod or a flat plate or turned into a girder or stuff like that. And that had certain properties to it, mechanical properties to it. People in the metallurgists in these foundries, what they've discovered is that for better edge holding, for better carbide formation, for finer carbide formation, and carbides are the crystalline structure of steel that makes them hard. They're carbides in a matrix of iron. Okay, the carbide is formed when carbon and iron are melted together. They form carbides. You can have iron carbides. You can do that with chromium. With iron and chromium, you might call it a chromium carbide. You can do that with tungsten. They're called tungsten carbides. You can do that with vanadium. Those are called vanadium carbides. So they're all the crystalline structures and the edge. And some carbides allow you to have a kind of bulky, thick, tactical edge, and some carbides allow you to have a very thin gracile, thin razor sharp edge, and that sort of stuff. So what they figured out was, if you let the metal cool on its own, it forms carbides of a certain size. Well, what happens if we take the steel, this ingot of steel that we just poured, and we then grind it back up? We're going to grind it back up into a powder finer than confectioner's sugar. Now you have steel powder, and we're going to reform it into an ingot or sheet, a rod, a bar, whatever. We're going to reform that steel again. Guess what happens? It's the same steel. The carbide sizes get smaller. They get finer. You can have finer edge holding. You can compact more particles of carbide into the edge of your knife so that there's less matrix interspersed between them.
Stronger
and
steel.
It's a better edge holding knife. So crucible particle metallurgy. Metallurgy just means manipulating steel. Manipulating metal. So that's a process called powder, and that in general that's called powdered metal. Crucible has their powdered metal version, which they call CPM. Carpenter in Pennsylvania, outside of Reading and Latrobe, Pennsylvania, has micro. They call it micro. I think it's called micro melt or whatever their process is. Same exact thing. Okay, Böhler Uddeholm and Sandvik in Sweden. Those two things, they have their what they call powdered metal technology. They don't call it UPM or anything like that. They just call it powdered metal. That's the newest thing for forming better edge holding for knife makers. It doesn't do squat if you're going to make armor plate for Abrams tanks or make girders to build buildings. It's designed specifically for knife makers. So CPM, crucible particle metallurgy, 20 CV. That's just what they named it. Okay. Now, you cannot...
The specific material, they named 20 CV.
They named it 20 CV. Okay. You cannot... You can't really patent steel. Okay? You can't patent steel. You can't patent vanadium. You can't patent tungsten or whatever. And all the metallurgists and stuff like that, for people who are going to use their stuff, they've got to publish their data so that the end users, the people who are going to use their steel, know what they're using, know which steel to choose for the right tool, die, pipeline material, valve, whatever they're going to make with. So it's all published. So 20 CV is what they call a metal of and I'll give you the composition of it, of a certain composition. And let's see, 20.
So I may have CV. A little more knowledge of this metallurgy that you're talking about than most that are going to be listening to this, just for the fact I told you I work in oil refineries.
Right.
And the heat treating of metals, the different alloys, and carbon versus stainless versus chromoly, 347 stainless, all that stuff that we use for the different heat elements of the refining process, and like the velocity and the heat, everything that runs through there has everything to do with the metallurgy. And that there's metallurgists out there that are super sharp guys that can tell you in the post-well heat treat process, what we call it, right? After you make a weld on 347 stainless or something like that, then you have to go in and you have to do exactly what you said, to raise the temperature up 600 degrees. Then we're going to go up to 1400, whatever the case, right? And we're going to hold for 6 or 7 hours, then come back down depending on the size of the weld. And then we got to do a brittleness test. They do what they call a hardness test, and they're going to test the brittleness of that metal and make sure that it's not going to crack under pressure and all that stuff.
Correct.
Right?
Before they start running 10,000 gallons a minute through that pipeline.
There you go. It's all safety precautions, right? Make sure we don't have leaks, we don't have failures, and you don't
want another Deepwater Horizon happening.
Exactly. So it's fascinating to see your side of the world in metallurgy and all that compared to kind of what we use it for. So
it's all the same stuff. We're doing it for different properties. You're doing it for strength, and ductility.
Yes.
We're doing it for abrasion resistance. So that's what we're optimizing it for.
Yeah.
So you would not make a pipeline out of 20 CV.
Correct.
Because it would just shatter the minute you flipped on the switch. But anyway, 20 CV, they call it 20 CV because it's got 20% chromium to it. Okay. And it's got vanadium to it. But that's Carpenter. Okay. Sorry, no, that's Crucibles. Carpenter makes the exact same steel, and they call it CTS 204P. Exact same steel, okay? The process may be a little different in terms of how they do their particle metallurgy and stuff like that, but the chemical composition of tungsten, chromium, carbon, vanadium, all that sort of stuff is the same. And guess what? Böhler Uddeholm makes the same thing, and they have their own process to make it, but it's called M390. So in that post, you saw that one was made with 20 CV and one was made with M390. It's just where I bought the freaking steel from. But it's a steel that has 4% vanadium to vanadium to it and 0.6% tungsten to it. 4% vanadium is an insane amount of vanadium. You're not going to buy a commercial knife made in that sort of stuff because it doesn't respond to a chef's steel. Okay, you can stroke it on a chef's rod, until you're blue in the face. You're never going to get it sharp again. It requires stones. That's why these are super steels.
Yes.
Okay, it just so happens. So that's the high performance. So that you get the steels that I use to make chef's knives with. Spyderco will do sprint runs out of 20 CV, but they won't do most of their stuff out of 20 CV. They'll do it out of lower alloyed steels because it's easier to make. But they'll make 500 blades out of that.
Yeah.
Okay? They won't make 10,000 blades out of that. But the performance that you get when you buy one of my knives is that you're going to get ultra high performance made out of ultra alloyed steels that will have better edge holding than anything you can go buy at Bed Bath & Beyond or online or whatever. Even if you go buy from Korin and from the Japanese folks, because the Japanese knife makers don't use that steel very regularly. The better steel that they'll use are SG2, which is the same here, is the same as LMAX from Sweden, or they'll use a HAP 40 or ZDP 189. So those are only 3 of the super steels that they'll use, and even those aren't as good as M4, S110V, Maximet, T15 Rex, T48, all those American steels, because those are what Hitachi and Kobelco and those mills over there use, and that's all they're going to use because they can still hammer out ZDP 189 to forge it, but they're not going to hammer out T15 Rex. It'll just split in half and shatter. Yeah. So, and they charge for those. They charge a lot for those knives made out of that steel because it's hard steel to work with. So that's my sort of niche in the world. The design of the handles, the profiles, but the type of steels that other people just don't want to use because they're really a pain in the ass to use. But when you get a knife made out of them, the performance is legendary. It's unbelievable. It's like I tell my chefs this, it's jaw-dropping performance that you've never had before, okay? Because of my grinds and because of the steel quality that I use, which is available to everybody.
Yeah.
You can buy this.
So that's my next question. Why doesn't anybody else
Because it's freaking $70 a pound versus people going out and rummaging through the freaking woods or think, oh, I found this 67 Volkswagen Bug and I got the freaking springs off of it. Look at me, people.
Yeah.
Oh, I got this old sawmill blade. Okay? This is repurposed steel. It's not going into the environment, blah, blah, blah. Well, it's mystery freaking steel. Yeah. Okay? Or it's just carbon steel to use. There's some excellent knife makers that make fabulous knives out of sawmill blades, but they just don't perform like 20 CV and M390 and S110V, that sort of stuff. But they make beautiful knives out of it. And they're high quality knife makers who are friends of mine. So I don't want to denigrate what they're doing, but that's for a different clientele. My clientele want ultra high performance. Okay, these other folks, they do a lot of forging and stuff like that. So they're not going to be forging Maximet or T15 Rex or anything like that, or M390. That's just me. That's my style. You want one of my knives, that's what you're going to get. Okay, you want somebody making out of reclaimed sawmill blades, and I can send you to 5 different guys who do fabulous work.
Yeah.
Okay, if that's what the aesthetic is that you want to have. So that's why I always on my Instagram post I tell you what type of steel it is, so you know that you're getting a certain performance from a certain mill, tuned to a certain degree of hardness and abrasion resistance, because that's just my obsessive nature of it.
Well, and that's what matters, according to the performance, right?
That's exactly what matters.
So
you can and the people, the hipsters turning out railroad spike knives. Yeah. Hey man, I got this chef's knife, this 6-inch chef's knife made out of railroad spike. Oh, it's like, really? How many times do you have to harden it? Oh, I got this Farrier rasp, and this Farrier rasp that was turned into a knife. I'm repurposing it because it'll just be thrown away. It's like, really? You can sharpen that on the concrete and a brick out of your garden. Yeah. If you can do that, what kind of performance you're going to get out? There are people making very expensive knives out of Farrier rasps, and they just thinking that, hey, that's just the coolest thing in the world, and really the performance is garbage. That's all I got to say. For chef's knife, it's just garbage.
Yeah. So what are some of the other myths or misinformation put out on the Forge to Fire show that we all know?
Some of the myths are that the way they harden the steel, got to get the right color change. It wasn't yellow. It was too yellow. They over hardened it. It was still too red. Blah 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 blah. And they come and they take then they harden it and they quench it in water, and then they quench it, and then they take their files and they go over it. So you're going to hear. You have to hear it skate along the edge. Okay. Well, guess what? I can give you an unhardened blade of S110V where the hardness files will go skating across the edge, because unhardened S110V has a Rockwell of 55 to 56. Most camp knives and tactical knives made out of A2 steel or other combat tough steels have a hardness of 56. Okay, already, and they're hardened and they're tempered. Yeah. So my unhardened steel is harder than your hardened bit of leaf spring that you got off the thing. Doesn't mean squat to it. Okay, just because the thing skates doesn't mean it doesn't mean that it's hardened properly. That it's not going to chip. That it's not going to get dull
after much
use and stuff like that. So, and it also gives the impression all I have to do is find some old junker of a vehicle and go cut off the carriage, the chassis off the thing, and figure out which. Or hey, I'll take apart a monkey wrench and I'll make a blade out of it. Well, you're going to make a blade that'll chop coconuts and chop cow bones, that sort of stuff. Number one. Number two, the flame. This is in air quotes again. The flame that they get. Remember, it's forged in fire. Okay, is that you have to stick it in the oil, and you have to then flame it up for the drama of it. It's like when I would do quenching stuff like that in oil or whatever. It's like you put it in there and you hold it there until it's down to the right temperature, and then you pull it out. There's no flame. There's no sexiness. I'm not going to burn I don't want to singe my vibrissae off my face. Vibrissae are whiskers on mice and cows and cats and stuff like that. I don't want to singe it off. I don't want to burn it. It's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. I mean, seriously. Yeah. But it's all for the camera that they're doing it for. When they talk about when they see people going over to the bucket of the barrel of water to quench their blade, and all the judges are going, oh, he's gonna crack. Wait a minute. You've just handed the people a hunk of W2 steel to make a knife blade out of. W2 steel makes fabulous chef's knives. It makes just absolutely fabulous chef's knives. I've used it. It's called W2 because it's a water quenching steel. That's how it's designed by the manufacturers of the steel, to be water quenched. You've just handed them water quenching steel, and then they're supposed to, and you told them that it's W2.
Yeah.
And then you sit there criticizing them for quenching in water. Tell me where the sensibility of that is.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see what else. There's a whole bunch of goofy stuff about there's a whole bunch of discussions on Facebook and stuff Facebook about this, on the Forged and Fire discussion groups, about the times that they allow you to do this stuff in. They actually time them. So
yes.
they only let you work 8 or 10 hours a day on it for the 5 days or whatever, and stuff like that. But one thing I notice is that they give them 5-minute epoxy to put their handles together with. It's like, I wouldn't use 5-minute epoxy to put postage on a letter. Okay? I mean, it's ridiculous. It's not waterproof. It's brittle as all get out. It doesn't hold. You're having a multi-day. That is done for their shooting schedule.
Yes.
To get them so that they can have it done. So I can't imagine, even if they let the 5-minute epoxy, because it takes 24 hours for 5-minute epoxy to cure correctly. It's called 5-minute epoxy because you can't move the two parts around after 5 minutes. The regular cured epoxy takes about 20 minutes before it's unmovable and stuff like that. But that also takes 24 hours to cure to the maximum hardness. So you have all these guys that do their... I competed on Cooks versus Cons for Food Network. Okay. And they have a certain shooting schedule that they have to do. And you take certain breaks in between each segment that they're shooting that we watch on TV. So in between the segment of them doing the handle material and then going to the cutting contest, I don't know how much there is. Everyone has to go to the bathroom, towel off, get a drink of water, get rehydrated, check your blood pressure, for the older guy, the older morbidly obese guys that are there. And I say that because I'm older and morbidly obese. Anyway, just get doing, and it's usually about 20 to 30 minute break in between to get the shooting schedule done for that day. So you've glued it up. And before they go into the judging thing or whatever, or the cutting portion of it, you're going to have at most maybe an hour between clamping with the glue and then starting to use it before you start hacking at the ice and hacking at the wood and hacking at the cow legs and stuff like that. I don't understand how these things stay together, because it gives the false impression to people watching on TV. And again, this is on the discussion groups where I see people who are clearly just newbies at it saying, I use a 5-minute epoxy and it just works great. It's like, trust me, the crap breaks down. I've had to redo a bunch of handles on some chef's knives from my early part of my career because the 5-minute epoxy is not waterproof. Therefore, it breaks down with heat and water and soap and oil, and then it just falls apart.
Everything that's in a kitchen. That's
exactly right. So you're giving them that false impression. This is what you need to use, 5-minute epoxy. And let's see, a hardening. I don't know why they do it, but hardening the blade before they drill the tang in the handles for the pins and stuff like that. And you see these guys getting these pins, the drill bits screeching through the handles and stuff like that.
Hardened steel now.
Because it's hardened steel now. Why don't these people realize? Let me just. It takes exactly 3 seconds. Not the 3 seconds. It takes about 2 minutes to drill each hole in an unhardened steel blade before you stick it to quench it and stuff like that. 2 freaking minutes. This is what. And what are you teaching people? Because what happens is, because there's a lot of knife makers I see that say, had what's called a helicopter accident where you're drilling a hardened tang and the bit grips the hardened thing and the thing spins around on the drill press. Guess what? It spins around, whack, goes straight into their wrist or the base of their thumb.
Wow.
Okay. Really? That's what you want to promote? You want me to tell you how much nerve and muscle injury you're going to get when that blade goes straight into their thenar eminence at the base of their thing? That type of stuff is a misrepresentation of how to make a knife. It's done for drama. Mm-hmm. It's done for shooting schedule. It's done for tension to build up for the audience. That sort of stuff.
It's a television show.
It's a television show, and I had a lot of fun on Cooks versus Cons. But they did some stuff for the drama as well. We did some retakes. We had to go running around a couple of times to get the right picture of us running and stuff like that. I understand that. That's just how it's done. The cooking part was actually real. We actually did all the real cooking and very very quickly as well in the time allotted, and then the rest of it is shooting. To get the right shots and stuff like that. So I had a lot of fun on that. But I understand how the production is. Yeah. And it gives a false impression. And a lot of people are realizing this is giving a lot of false impression. What the benefit, what's going on now is all the suppliers who sell knife making supplies, they're having an absolute economic boom. They can't supply forges fast enough. They can't sell tongs and hammers fast enough. They can't sell fire bricks and Venturi burners and stuff like that fast enough. It's incredible. The good thing is, probably in a couple of years when the next sexy show is on TV, that's now you're building model airplanes or you're doing origami or something like that. Everybody's going to stop doing their forging, and then there's going to be a lot of cheap forges and anvils. Oh, it's driven the price of anvils through the roof too. They're going to start. They're going to want to get. Why do I have this anvil in my thing? I don't make blades anymore. Well, I need to get rid of this 200-pound hay button anvil made in 1894 that I paid $2,000 for. Wow. Which 10 years ago you could just get for free as long as you would haul it off somebody's property.
Yeah. Isn't that funny how that works?
Yeah. So anyway.
So I got one last thing I want to talk about. We'll let you get at it. We're 2 hours 20 minutes in this thing. By the way. So I want to ask how you came to Texas and your favorite spots around here in Houston, like just to eat, to hang out, breweries, anything like that.
Well, I came to Texas for my first job, which was in medical examiner in Galveston County.
Okay.
I was in Alabama for 4 years before that, being state medical examiner there. So I came to work in Galveston County and lived in Houston. My ex-spouse at that time was in private practice here in Houston, so we lived up here, and we wanted to. We just got into the Houston lifestyle. Mm-hmm. She had to get into the hospital at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I didn't. So it was better to live closer for her than for me. So I would travel down to Texas City, and now I have my own private practice here, and I travel around the state to other medical examiner office to work there as well as do my private cases here and doing my part-time and doing my knife making here. So that's how we ended up in Texas. And plus, I also got sick. When my oldest son was born, he was born during went to labor during a snowstorm. But that winter, we had 114 inches of snow and 24 snowstorms in Connecticut.
Wow.
Okay, 104, and it was miserable. I grew up in Philadelphia, so I know about snow and slush and ice storms. And Texas, once you come to the South, you just don't want to leave. Yeah. I laugh at my family that was living in the Northeast, saying, "Oh, you're under 2 feet of snow up there, and it's 68 degrees right now, and I'm in shorts." Yeah, I say this to everybody. I've never cooked a meal, a Thanksgiving meal in Houston, and I do a lot of deep fry my turkeys. That's what I love about the South, is I learned to do it. I've never cooked a Thanksgiving meal in anything other than shorts and t-shirt.
That's right.
And I grew up going through the snow to my aunt and uncle's house outside of Philadelphia, having that white wintry Thanksgiving and that white wintry Christmas and stuff like that. Guess what? I don't miss that crap anymore. Yeah. I just don't miss it anymore. I'm sorry. So I like Houston. One of my favorite areas around Houston. For eating and stuff like that?
Eating, hanging out. I mean, whatever you like to do, whatever you're into around here.
Well, I hang out a lot at Drum Ghouls at 2515 Rice Boulevard, down in the Village. That's where I do all the pen stuff as well. But we like to hang out in the Village. A lot of places are places I like to eat. Helene, stuff like that. One of my favorite restaurants is now defunct Underbelly. Again, for Chris Shepard. We love Chinatown. The restaurants out there.
Do you visit the market down there in Chinatown at all?
We go to Viet Ho, go to Hong Kong, and we go to Hong Kong City Mall and stuff like that. We love that sort of. I have made sure. I've listened to stories about my other friends and family's kids. They would poo-poo stuff. They only want to eat quesadillas and French fries. Never did that with my kids. My kids I purposely made them very adventurous eaters. They eat like princes here, but they eat exotic foods, and they show it when they go out to the restaurants. I've got right behind me. You see like 200 cookbooks.
Yes, yes, I see that.
I've got another 300 around the corner there. Very cosmopolitan city. So I go to one of my favorite markets to shop at is Phoenicia for all the Middle Eastern, Eastern European, Bulgarian, Turkish foods, pastries, produce and stuff like that. We love lamb, so I do a lot of lamb cooking. That's where I love to shop as well. The food that they make at Phoenicia to eat there, an incredible food. Pastries, delicious. So we go out there a lot. Go to Chinatown. Go rummage through the malls. I love H Mart and 99 Ranch Market for shopping for exotic stuff that I like to experiment with and use and stuff like that. For just hanging out, what do I like to do? Go to Texas Knife Maker Supply a lot. Outside the Beltway 8 in that area. One other thing that I did a lot more of was I was into archery.
Okay.
So I won the silver medal in the 2007 Texas State Field Archery Championship.
Wow.
I got 14 bows.
Long bows or compound bows?
I've got 2 Olympic recurves with the full Olympic setup with the pin sights and the stabilizer, stuff like that. And the rest of them are recurves. I'm sorry, the rest of them are compound bows, which is a lot of fun to do. And I competed in them. So I find that very relaxing. So
very meditative, right?
Very meditative.
Yes.
Very meditative. It's like slow fire 22 caliber shooting. And I was taught to shoot by a champion shooter up in Connecticut. A champion rimfire shooter, and it is just zoning in, tunnel vision, total meditation as you shoot. I know a lot of people are going to talk about how bad shooting is and stuff like that. I'm talking about Olympic style shooting. You clear your mind of everything. No bills you have to pay. You don't have to worry about changing the battery in your car. You won't worry about if the dog's pregnant or anything like that, or if the raccoons are in the garbage. It's just total meditative. Same thing for archery.
Yes.
Archery is just like that for me as well. I've got my sons into it as well. So we go down to, it's now called 10X Archery off of Bissonnette here, just inside 59. It's a fabulous indoor range to go, and it's only 7 minutes away from the house, so you can go there.
Yeah.
So go hang out there. What else? I do a ton of reading. I schlep my kids around to they're fabulous. Unlike me, they are fabulous athletes. So I schlep them around and go to piano lessons and track and field meets and stuff like that.
Awesome, man.
So food, family, knives. That's how I kind of divide up my time here in Houston.
Steven, this has been awesome, man. I don't know that you realize how much of a gem you are, man. Your vast knowledge of the history of what you enjoy. I have a ton more that I even want to talk to you about that we didn't even get to. So maybe we can sit down and do this again sometime. Sure. But it's really been awesome. It's really been entertaining. It's informative. I've learned a ton. It's exactly what I was hoping for. I really appreciate you coming on and doing this with me, man.
Well, you're very welcome. I don't even think I told you my brand. My brand is Houston Edgeworks.
Houston Edgeworks.
HoustonEdgeworks.com. On the web, Penman88, or search Houston Edgeworks on Instagram. I've got a Facebook page. You can contact me off there. People that are local are welcome to come and see all the tons of handle material, and we can design a knife out. You can tell me what your special needs are, or if you just want a freaking knife, just come and look at it. It's really cool to talk knives with people and with chefs and show them what I do and what they can have and so on and so forth. So that's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And come visit me at Drum Ghouls. I know I've mentioned it several times. They're like my second family. They've been with me for decades. If you want something funky and fountain pens and cool papers and stuff like that, and you can see some of my knives there. If you like Benchmade, Gold Class, William Henry knives. He's a fabulous dealer for folding knives as well. And we host, every once in a while, we'll host a knife gathering for Usual Suspects Network.
Okay.
As well, which you know what the USN is?
I do not.
USN is a bunch of gathering of real knife nuts and knife enthusiasts and stuff like that. And they have chapters around. So we're the Southeast chapter, and we'll host it there and just show knives. It's just like little boys on the playground in the sandbox. We
never really grew up. Still.
We whip it out and show it to each other once in a while. We compare we compare ourselves to each other.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm sorry for that, but anyway.
No.
So it's a lot of fun.
Awesome, man. Well, like I said, thank you again. Hopefully we'll get on here and do this again. I want to get kind of into I saw you posted a picture the other day with the operating room in the late 1800s, early 1900s, where doctors would gather to see new operations and new surgeries.
Right. And that was for Doctor's Day.
There you go. Yes.
National Doctor's Day. And that day was chosen, which was March 30th, because that was the first day that an operation was done under general anesthesia, and it was done with ether. Okay, ether is, number one, highly volatile and explosive. Number two, it's highly deadly and poisonous. But the way ether was, and the fumes affect everybody around it. And that picture is a very classic one from the ether dome, where the anesthesiologist would be the one to put the sort of cloth-covered mask over their face and drip ether on the patient to titrate their level of consciousness. So as they're cutting on the person, if they start to wiggle a little bit because they're showing a feeling, they titrate a little bit more ether on the thing to let them inhale it. And they have to run that very fine line between anesthesia and sleep and asphyxiation and death.
Killing them.
Exactly correct. As well as having, and they used to do these operations with open flame lamps in the operatory.
Oh, wow. And ether. Yeah.
And ether, correct. So a lot of operatories would have glass domes to them to let sunlight in. Okay? So they would have less of an explosion. So that's why I posted that. That was for Doctor's Day.
Yeah. So have you seen The Nick, that show?
I've not.
So do you know what it's about?
It's about plastic surgery and stuff like that, and surgery that goes wrong and stuff like that.
So it's around that time that you're talking. They're learning. So it kind of comes in on the they're doing C-sections, cesarean sections on women, and they're obviously right. So they're trying to say they're not having success saving the baby, and they're losing the mom. So so it's a doctor. Clive Owen plays this doctor. He's hopped up on cocaine and all this other crap. And anyways, it's the Nick is hospital in New York, I think was a famous hospital at the time. I don't even know if it's historically accurate or whatever, but it's a fascinating show about the early years of medicine. And yes,
I was a biochemistry major at University of Pennsylvania with a minor in history, and multiple of my courses were history of medicine courses. So that's why I love history of medicine and stuff like that.
Well, my wife is a nurse, and we watched that show together, and I was just fascinated by it. It's an awesome show. It's drama. It's a TV show, all that good stuff or whatever. But they actually go into, you talk about rolling out the autopsy utensils, right? And he's got this sleigh of scary looking stuff. And anyways, it's a pretty good show. It's on Showtime or whatever. I think they're on the 3rd season or something like that. It's pretty good.
That's cool.
You may enjoy it.
Well, Philadelphia had the Philadelphia College of Surgeons, which was the first surgical medical association, I think, in the country back in the 18th century. And then we have what's called the Mutter Museum, which is observing a centenary or 200 year or whatever, which is nothing but old medical stuff related to medicine. And we have textbooks and we have video and we have the internet now if you want to learn about different diseases and stuff like that. Back then they didn't do that. They had traveling wax sets. So if they wanted to show somebody with measles, they would take a wax casting of somebody's face who had measles and take a wax cast of it, like 3/4 of the face. And then an artist would come in and paint the measles on the thing so that when they went to medical school, because there's no printed material or photographs of measles, they would have this face in wax of measles or of basal cell carcinoma or leishmaniasis that eats away the nose and stuff like that, or a cutaneous horn coming out of the forehead or whatever. But they were actual real models of diseases. Those are all there. The skeleton of one of the tallest men in the world is there. He donated his body to science. They defleshed him and they reconstituted his skeleton, and he's there. I think the skeleton of Major Tom Thumb, the shortest man in the Guinness Book of World Records, I think his is there as well. I think the skeleton of some part of Ching and Chang or Yin and Yang or whoever it was, the famous conjoined twins, those Asian conjoined twins, that is there as well. The real stuff, medical collections of these weird devices that you throw, these weird, horrible instruments.
Yes.
Did you ever see a tonsil fork?
No.
It was a cool thing. You had these two rings. Each of the rings, the inside of each ring is sharpened edge. And in it is a two-pronged fork. So it was a handle. You take the tonsil, you put the rings around the tonsil. Okay, they slide against each other like a guillotine. You put the tonsil in back of the throat. You put it around the tonsil. You fire one lever, and this two-pronged fork goes straight through the tonsil across the rings and holds the tonsil in place. And then you fire the other lever, and the two rings stick across each other like that, and they cut because they're both sharpened on the inside. You've got these two circular blades going against each other, and that cuts your tonsil off. That's how they did it in the 19th century world. That was a tonsil fork, or tonsillectomy, whatever they called it, a guillotine or whatever.
Yeah,
all those weird things they're all there at the Motor Museum as well.
That's what I'm saying, man. You have an awesome knowledge of all this stuff. I could do a 2 or 3 hour podcast over pens with you, over knives with you, and over your medicals. It's fascinating stuff, man. It's really awesome. So we'll go ahead and wrap this up. You got anything else coming up, or anything else you want to tell everybody?
No, just come order your knives early. I've got an 18-month waiting list at least. So for people who want to order a knife for 2020, get on the list now.
Get on the list.
And I know people are just giving me deposits to get on the list, and those knives are finally coming up. Go to Houston Barbecue on the 9th up in Humble. See some fabulous barbecue. See my knives in the hands of Aaron Malakian and Joy Victorian as well, and go support the barbecue folks here. Come visit us at Dromgools, and that's about it. I mean, just have fun. And you, like everybody else, we're waiting for the next iteration of Underbelly and Chris Shepard and what he's doing.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Thank you again. Thank y'all for listening. Thank y'all for paying attention. If y'all have any questions, comments, or whatever, shoot me an email. Let me know what y'all are thinking. I'm on the Lone Star Podcast on Facebook, at the Lone Star Podcast on Instagram, and at Lone Star PCast on Twitter. Hit me up. Shoot your comments and questions, concerns. Thank y'all for listening. Thank you, Stephen, again.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a lot of fun, man. Y'all be good.